until you hit it.
That's
Okay, we're going.
hello, good people of internet.
All right. Hello, everybody. You guys, we're having a panel today, and we have a guest with us. We will be discussing things going on in Kenosha surrounding the Kyle Rittenhouse issue. This distinguished panel, I'm going to ask all of them to introduce themselves one at a time. This is being simulcasted to multiple streams. Let's start with you, Mr. Dredd.
I'm Johnny Walker Dredd. I've been at it here as far as the YouTubing thing goes for maybe about a year and a half. And I started off about maybe a few months before the Kenosha shootings, and then I got involved in that and devoted my entire channel towards it. I have about almost 400 videos now on Kyle. And so I've been hammering the Kyle Rittenhouse deal for quite a long time here. And, I just think that, I'll tell you what, I won't go into my beliefs and stuff like that because we just want to introduce ourselves. That's me.
All right, logical checkmate. Your turn.
Hey, cheers, my minds. My name is Paul. I come from Czech Republic. Very much interested in self-defense and etc. And I'm very interested in the Kyle Rittenhouse case because literally everything is on camera from start to finish. Yet people cannot agree on even what happened. So I find it very worrisome and have big problems with lying media. So yeah, I'm like at home here.
All right, Bernewski.
Hey guys, name's Bernewski. I just started doing YouTube like a month and a half ago. Put out, what I try to make kind of funny videos on just like, topics that are interesting to me. I'm basically one of the few sane people in this open air insane asylum of a world we live in, and I'm just trying to, tell people what I think is going on, even though I think everyone else is insane.
All right, well, that brings us last but not least, Kevin Matheson.
Hey, good afternoon, morning, depending on where you live. My name is Kevin Mathewson. I am the editor and investigative journalist for KenoshaCountyEye.com. That's KenoshaCountyEye.com. I'm a criminal defense investigator. I live right here in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Obviously, I have great interest in the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse. I had a little bit of personal involvement in the events of last summer, which we can go into if you guys want to talk about that at some point. But I'm here just rooting for justice to prevail. I hope Kyle is acquitted, and I hope he can get on with his life as normally as possible. It's going to be tough for this kid to lead a normal life, but we need to pray for this kid, and hopefully that he can prosper once he's set free.
All right, well, what I'd like to do, first of all, is give you an opportunity to explain what the Kenosha Guard is and what it is not, as there seems to be a lot of hoopla about that because you guys are called the militia. There was another group out there that was calling itself libertarians. So just take a moment to take the floor and explain precisely what the Kenosha Guard is.
So the
Neil,
Kenosha...
I'm sorry, just before you begin, Kevin. Neil, did you get to introduce yourself? I was distracted.
Oh
yeah, we didn't.
Yeah, good point. Think on your answer. Hi, I'm Neil Kiernan, the host of V Radio. I've been podcasting since 2008. I now do YouTube and podcasts. I interview congressmen, senators, presidential candidates, activists, documentary filmmakers, scientists, and today I'm glad to be part of this panel. I've been working with these gentlemen for a while, although this is the first time I've been able to stream with Bernewski. And I'm excited for where we're going from here. So again, feel free to go ahead and answer the question now. Sorry about that.
Sure. All right. So my city was burning to the ground. I saw the video of the Jacob Blake shooting on my cell, and right away, I knew it was going to be big. Anybody with half a brain watching a video of a white police officer shooting a black dude in the back knew that this was going to be serious. So right then and there, I knew that Kenosha was going to be in the spotlight for some time to come. Drove down to the scene with a friend of mine, and we saw the crowd getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They started to destroy the police cars, pop the tires, smash the windshields. And as I was leaving, that was when a police captain got hit in the head with a brick and got knocked unconscious.
Right.
He is doing well. Tom Ham is his name. He's a captain with Kenosha Police. And in fact, he was back there kicking ass within like a couple days, even with a concussion. So
Yeah, I was
mean,
going to say he had to have been concussed. That's rough.
Yeah, he was concussed. So then that night, a part of our city burnt down, and actually, I have two children, and the part of the city in which they were born and raised was kind of right in the hood. You know, at the time I was single. I wanted a big house. I didn't care of the neighborhood, so I bought me a big house, and a few years later got married, had a couple kids. We moved since to a different part of the city, but that was my old stomping grounds that I was watching burn, just being burnt in the name of whatever justice, and it really pissed me off. And you know, for those of you who don't know, here in Kenosha, our mayor is a Democrat, our county exec is a Democrat, our sheriff is a Democrat, the governor is a Democrat. So all these Democrats basically decided that they'd rather watch our city burn than to ask for help from President Trump, who was president at the time. So they said the wires got crossed. They forgot to ask for National Guard troops in time. They didn't even ask for mutual aid as far as other law enforcement. So after 2 nights of watching my city burn, I said, screw this. You know, I had a blue little check mark on Facebook at the time, which I'm proud to say today I am permanently banned. I've got Zucked, which I wear as a badge of honor. Obviously, if that dude doesn't, you know, he has to sit on pillows when he sits in front of Congress. I just think it's funny. But anyways, so I put out a post on a Facebook page I had called the Kenosha Guard. So what the Kenosha Guard was a Facebook page to get the word out. And I said, look, my city is burning. We need help. Citizens, protect your neighborhoods, your homes, your lives, your businesses. And it exploded. Thousands and thousands of interactions. People RSVPing. Yeah, we'll be there. People poured in from the state of Wisconsin, from the state of Illinois. So what it was it was a plea for help. It was a call to arms. It utilized the First, Second Amendment to say, we need help. This is the exact incident. This is the exact scenario in which you need the Second Amendment, because the government could not provide for our safety, because they were too proud to ask for help from a Republican, somebody across the aisle. What the Kenosha Guard was not is a militia. There were no meetings, membership, organization. It was just a group of people that thought, you know, we had enough. And that was the first time I've ever carried my AR-15 in public. I did so. Others joined me. And, you know, a lot of people slept better that night. And, you know, the police felt a little more safe having friendlies there too. And that's why, you know, we were not sent home under threat of arrest. We were allowed to remain. And obviously on the 25th, Kyle Rittenhouse was attacked by 3 career criminals, one being a pedophile, one being a woman beater, and the third being just a general all-around scumbag. And he survived the attack. But obviously our district attorney also is a Democrat, and he's universally hated by the left and the right. He decided to charge Kyle in a political decision that will probably be his undoing. And here we are today, right in the middle of the trial.
So I want to give everybody an opportunity, I guess, to kind of comment. Normally I don't interview a new person with a big panel, but that's the format today. So Johnny, do you have any questions for our guest?
Can you describe how well you know Kraus and Binger and the other people involved in this trial?
So very well. So I'm a private investigator, and I usually work with defense attorneys. So I'm in the courtroom. I'm gathering evidence. I'm getting discovery. I'm telling these attorneys what kind of information I think we need in order to find some reasonable doubt. So I'm working with these guys all the time. And Kraus and Binger are a couple of the most unethical boobs in that building. And they're Kraus, I will say, is incompetent. He's just not a good attorney overall. Binger is polished. I mean, we've seen him in mean, the whole world is basically calling him an idiot. He knows it, and yet still he somehow can compose himself in some manner, right? So he's not a complete idiot. I mean, a lot of these people who like to tread on our rights are smart enough to cause danger, to cause damage, right? So I know them pretty well, and I've had nothing but bad interactions with both of them. They're prosecutors that push the limits whenever they can, and they're unethical. They want to win at all cost. They claim to be these progressive Democrats, yet they vigorously prosecute, marijuana crimes and low level stuff too. So it just doesn't make sense. And so yeah, I've had a lot of interaction with them. I've sued Kraus before. That one's about to be granted in my favor in January. And I got another lawsuit against Gravely for not turning over documents, basically personnel files of prosecutors that have been pushed out for misconduct. He didn't want to share that with me. An attorney in Kenosha called Tom Kamenek. He runs the Wisconsin Transparency Project. His only thing that he does in his law firm is public records. He's suing them, and I think we're going to win. So that's just fun to do that. And so yeah, I know these two guys very well. They're unethical, and their boss, Mike Gravely, who's working behind the scenes, but he doesn't want people to know that. He wants to stay out of the limelight. He's calling the shots, and he's really the main bad guy here because the buck stops with him. He, at the end of the day, decides who is charged, who is not, and he decides if these guys, what kind of motions they're pretrial motions they're considering or not. So I mean, he's the guy behind the scenes, kind of working the puppet strings, and they're all just all around dirtbags, if you ask me.
Can you describe, because I've covered it in my channel quite a bit. I've had a few videos on it, but for our listeners, the relationship between Gravely and local activists on the left, you've covered it. How would you characterize it?
So Whitney Cabal is her name. She goes by several aliases. Billy Violet. I like to call her Billy Violent. I caught her on some CNN show, and I'm thinking to myself, who is this chick? I've never seen her before. And I was an alderman in Kenosha, so I was involved in local politics. So I know a lot of people, in the city. And I remember thinking, why is this woman representing Kenosha to the Main Street media? They must think we're a bunch of dumb hillbillies. And she started talking about how she thinks looting, rioting, burning down buildings is therapeutic and it should be allowed, and she supports that. And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. Well, then she goes on to talk about how she's text buddies with Gravely. Oh, I text with Mike Gravely all the time. He's my buddy. So I'm like, she could be bluffing, but there could be some truth for that. So I put in a public records request, and Gravely turned over hundreds of pages of her and him going back and forth via text message, which I thought was wholly inappropriate. I mean, he's talking about ongoing investigations. He's asking her to, she's asking him to go to breakfast, which he accepts, and just improper, unethical communication between a far left extremist who condones burning, rioting, looting, and the man who's supposed to be in charge of the rule of law in the county. So, and even after that, a couple months later, I asked for text messages. There were several hundred more. So, I mean, this is a guy who gets caught touching the stove time and time again and just doesn't learn. So he always had this practice of turning over the records that I asked for. And then all of a sudden, once he sees how embarrassing it is, he just cuts that line of communication and says, hey, I'm not giving you documents anymore. So that's when I said, okay, great. We'll go to court. And here in Wisconsin, if a governmental body denies a record, you sue and you win. You get your attorney's fees paid for, your filing fees, electronic fees, everything paid for. I've won lawsuits against the sheriff in the past in the same manner, against the city of Kenosha. It's, I know the public records laws pretty well. I'm not an attorney, but that's what I do for a living. I get information. And so now I'm having to sue for stuff, which is fine with me because I'm making some lawyers money, and it's just fun to look over at Gravely and see the judge side in my favor. So yeah, very inappropriate relationship that shouldn't have happened, and it really causes people to lose faith in the fairness and the neutrality of the system.
So let's.
And by the way, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, let's give Paul a chance to ask a question as well. Just go ahead and do your follow up, and then after that, we'll take turns.
Yeah. Sorry about hogging the forum.
No, we'll come back to you no matter what. We'll just keep circulating. That was all. But yeah,
Alright.
go ahead. Go ahead and ask the one you were just going to ask, though.
That's to Johnny, I believe.
Yes, to you, Johnny. Go ahead and ask
Oh,
whatever
okay.
you were just going to say while it's fresh in your mind.
Actually, I was just going to say that you've actually exposed these text messages in your newspaper, if I recall.
Yes, I've published them, and you guys know what pingbacks are, I'm guessing, right? So I get a pingback every time somebody shares my article or links to it, and I have to just ignore them because I get so many of them. So I start looking at the stats at my website and such, and it's like millions of people have seen these text messages, and whenever people want to ask me about it, they say the same thing. How in the hell did you get these text messages? I asked them for them. They're public record. Whether he's using a cell phone, a computer, an iPad, if he's talking about official business, that's a public document here in Wisconsin. It's subject to disclosure. He gave them to me. I published them, and they've been seen millions of times all over the world. And really, people are starting to see that, these this wave of progressivism in the DA system, where you let these criminals go without consequences. And I think that's where Kenosha's heading. But the good thing is after all this, he's decided not to run again. So that's good news for my neighbors here in Kenosha.
All right, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, during the riots, was basically your feeling that the police they didn't have enough people, or that they were ordered to stay back? And I'm asking like that because I've literally seen a video where there was a parking lot of cars on fire. The fire was somewhat small at the time, and there was standing a single lady twerking in the middle of the street, and police officers in armored cars would not proceed, to secure the location. And they were just telling her, hey, you have to go away, instead of, just going there and basically pushing her, away, or arresting her, whatever, and securing the scene so the firefighters can, fight the fire. They didn't do that for long minutes. The fire spread, and the whole parking lot was destroyed. So was it because they didn't? Was it like that because the riots were as bad in Kenosha as they were because the police were ordered to hold back, or because they didn't have enough manpower?
So I can't tell you the answer to that question with absolute certainty, but I can tell you based on what I've seen, what I believe happened. So who was in charge really of the command of the riots was a man by the name of David Beth. He's a Democrat. He puts the R in front of his name because he has to. This county elects Republicans. Just like if you guys are familiar with David Clark, he's the African-American sheriff of Milwaukee. He had a D in front of his name, but he's one of the biggest Trump-supporting conservatives that we've ever had as sheriff in Milwaukee. So don't get confused by the R in front of his name. He is a Democrat. So I have the utmost confidence in all of the police officers that had their boots on the ground that night. I think they were afraid for their lives, right? There were chemical bombs being thrown. They were being shot at. They were being explosives were being thrown at them. So rightfully so, they were scared for their lives, right? And the sheriff at the time, who was calling the shots, did make some type of stand down orders, and we heard that in testimony. And I don't know if you guys caught it, but one of the officers said we were told to kind of observe at a safe distance, right? What does that mean to us? It means stand down, right? And there is some of that logic that has to be understood where, if these animals are burning cars, and let's say there's only 5 police officers, I don't think they should put their lives on the line for these cars, right? Because they're going to get themselves injured, killed. So the problem, to answer your call, or to answer your question, was with the sheer numbers. If we would have had enough boots on the ground, those police officers could have walked over to those looters, rioters, thugs, and they could have unloaded rubber bullets on them. They could have arrested them. They could have maced them, tased them, whatever. but they just didn't have the numbers to do it safely. It was a state of lawlessness, and these thugs knew this. So that's why you had these Joseph Rosenbaum, Gage Grosskreutz, Anthony Huber. These are people that were attracted to this lawlessness because they thought, wait, I can just do whatever I want with no consequences. I'm in. Where do I sign up? And so that's what they did. They showed up. So they died, and Gage got shot doing what they did for the rest of their life was feeding off of crime and violence. So I have utmost confidence in the sheriff's department, the police department, all the neighboring departments, the National Guard. They were brave, and they did what they could to protect life that night. But I'm afraid they had two very mitigating circumstances working against them. They had the stand down type orders, probably, that came from the governor and the sheriff. And number two, they didn't have the manpower. So those two things were working against them, and that is why we weren't able to see the arrests we want. So we weren't able to see some of these idiots being held accountable. So I hope that answers your question.
Right.
Okay. We had a question, I guess, from Goof Chick in the chat. She said, I guess, does that essentially mean you were responsible for bringing Kyle Rittenhouse to the city? I mean, I guess I feel you kind of already answered that by stating that, that
Sure.
you put it out on Facebook. But if you want to expand in any way on, like, did you meet Kyle? Did you talk to him?
So her Goof Chick, I just want to make sure I'm addressing her properly.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Okay, Goof Chick. So it's been proven. So we had Kyle's lawyers that said he had no idea about the Kenosha Guard. We had Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, the pillow-sitting little curly-haired dork, saying Kenosha Guard was not seen by Kyle Rittenhouse. You had the FBI that looked through my phone and my GPS, everything that there was. They have access to all my stuff, which made me happy because they could see I had no involvement with the kid. Not because I think he definitely did the right thing and he's justified, but I don't want the leftist trolls getting fed into this. Mathewson. I've been accused of giving him the gun. I've been accused of driving him to Kenosha from Maniac. I've never met the kid. Okay, I've seen him in court. I've been in court every day, but Kyle Rittenhouse was in Kenosha on the 25th, scrubbing graffiti hours before I put up the call to arms. That kid, if you've seen the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson, his kids, he had an older kid, Heath Ledger, who was 17, who enlisted, and then he had the younger kid who really wanted to enlist, but he said, no, you're not old enough. Kyle Rittenhouse was that kid who wanted to go help, knew he wasn't really old enough, mentally, and I think he was a little naive that night and thinking, not thinking of the possible outcomes. But that doesn't mean he didn't have a sense of duty. He wanted to help, right? He put his life on the line to help. But there's no connection. I've never talked to Kyle in my life, never communicated with him. So Facebook, they have this data. If you're scrolling through Facebook and you see an ad for Viagra, they know that you saw that ad because Viagra just got charged 2 pennies for you seeing it. So they have very, very good software, so they can tell. The defense had a forensic examiner who looked at Kyle's phone. Everybody has concluded he did not see my Facebook page. So I take no responsibility for him being there. That being said, if he would have seen my page and that was the reason why he was there, I wouldn't give a crap anyways. I don't know if we can swear or not, but I wouldn't care.
No, well,
Yeah.
I don't. Well, I know it's okay on my stream. Is it okay on you guys' streams? It's up to you if you're going to do cussing or not.
Well, I know it's okay on Paul's because if that was a violation, Paul has. I mean, man, he swears like a pirate. Oh my
I'll
gosh.
keep it PG-13.
I'm not worried about it at all.
So in short, I don't believe, and all the evidence says he did not come here because of me. But even if he did, it wouldn't matter to me one bit. I mean, he made the choice to come here. He came here. He defended himself against 3 people who wanted to kill him. And now this is where we're at. I was sued twice in federal court, saying that I violated people's federal rights. Both of them, the judge threw them out. So Binger made some comments to some judges and other attorneys. He's stupid. Remember, I work for these attorneys. Man, I really wish there was something I could charge Mathewson with, inciting violence or, conspiring to create mayhem or whatever. They couldn't find anything in the books to charge me with because I didn't do anything wrong. So I've been found to not have done anything criminally wrong or civilly wrong. So, there's still people out there that say Kyle crossed state lines. There's people out there that just say all this crap that's just not true. And you know what? It's laughable. So if people don't want to read and follow the trial and listen to the evidence, then they're beyond our help. And we just need to give them a little sippy cup and let them move on.
I want to take a quick, brief second of personal privilege to point out that it has been revealed, even by the USA Today, trying to fact check and claim that that it wasn't like other people from out of state lines. Even they had to admit that well over 100 rioters were arrested in Kenosha that were from outside the state of Wisconsin. So it's just ridiculous. But anyway, it is now Bernewski's turn.
Gotcha. Well, I have a few questions for you. I mean, the first one, you mentioned earlier that and V Radio kind of alluded to this, that your city was being burned down, there were fires and that sort of stuff. Are you telling me that they weren't mostly peaceful protests?
That's exactly what I'm telling you.
Okay, exactly just wanted to be clear on that. They've been saying something different in the media for a year. Other than that, I did want to ask. You said that you are an editor. I think you said an editor for the Kenosha Eye. Is that correct?
Yeah, Kenosha County Eye.
Kenosha County Eye. Is that the website that Binger actually took a dig at for one of the witnesses on the stand the other day?
Yeah. So let me tell you that story. If you guys want to hear it, it's actually a fascinating story.
We'd love it.
So basically, I was made aware. I'll put it that way, that the prosecution team was really trying to get this witness to change his story. And just to show you, they're not just bad attorneys, but they're lazy attorneys. We're talking last month. Okay. The trial was November 1st. Halfway through October, they're starting to really interview witnesses and get their strategy put in place. So we're talking 2 weeks before the trial. So that just goes to show they're not just unethical and incompetent, but they're also just lazy. So anyways, so they're pressuring this witness to change his story, right? So I interviewed him. I put out the article and I said, hey, kid, I said, well, he's not a kid, he's my age, but I said, you need to get an attorney. I said, the fact that they're threatening you, implicitly threatening to take action against you for not changing your story, and for the fact that they're trying to get you to change your story 12, 13 months later anyways, is cause for alarm. I said, get an attorney. So he got an attorney. He showed up in court, and I got to say, he kicked butt. I mean,
he was fantastic.
And so the prosecution literally, Jack Prosobiec, he put a couple of links to my website about this article, and he broke my damn website. My website, people are telling me your website's down. What's going on? I said, I don't know. I looked. It was tweeted about from Jack Prosobiec, which is like he's a conservative commentator. So he broke my website. It was back up in a couple minutes, but the prosecutors obviously saw this article, and so they flipped. So they changed from trying to convict Kyle Rittenhouse to trying to prove that they did not commit misconduct. So if you notice, that whole line of questioning was nothing to do with what he observed or what pictures he had. The whole line of questioning was, well, we didn't ask you to change your story, did we? Yes, you did. So
I especially loved when he threw the statement to him on the bench. That was hilarious.
So Nathan DeBruin, and I got to plug it, but he's got a website up. It's photos by Nate D, NATED.com, photos by NateD.com. He's selling these pictures. I've been getting inundated with emails. They want autographed photos and stuff. So if you guys want to, maybe go buy a photo off this guy or send him $5. I mean, the fact that he had to retain an attorney because he was afraid of the prosecutors when he was a witness that was there, with no other reason than just to document that night. It was pretty scary. So if you want to send him $5, go ahead. If you go to my website, you can email me and I'll send you his article, or I'll get you in touch with him, either his email or his cell phone number. But
I was just going to say, I'd like to interview him for sure.
Yeah, he stood strong, and you got to give him credit, because a lot of people similarly situated would be nervous and they'd probably crack under that pressure. But you know what? He said, hell no, I'm not changing my statement. I wrote this 13 months ago. I stick behind it. You can take this statement and shove it up your, what, Mr. Binger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing I will say about Nate DeBruin is that his demeanor would tend to indicate to you that you could wrangle him when he's on the stand. Oh, this guy, he's going to be easy, right? Because he comes off as somewhat, well, I don't know how you would put it, but he's a little quirky. And I just had a feeling that the prosecution thought, oh, this guy's a deer in the headlights. And they went in. But unfortunately for them, Nathan used that in a way to kind of attack them. And it came out to them. It came out to everybody, I think, that, well, there's a really good guy. He's really sweet-natured, and these meanies are trying to get him to say something he doesn't want to say.
That's exactly what it was. They did not realize what they were walking into. And what they walked into is a kid who thought, you know what? I'm not going to be made to look like a fool in front of millions of people. It's going to be the guys on the other side of the table. You know, it's
right.
It reminded
one
me.
More thing.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, it reminded me of a tweet I saw. Somebody says, I'm confused. How come there's 4 attorneys for Kyle, but the other side has 0 attorneys? It was just interesting. Every witness they put on the stand just killed their case.
And one of the more popular videos on YouTube has always been, don't talk to the police, right? And Nathan DeBruin made the mistake of going in there without a lawyer, but he did get one, and that really did save him, I think.
So I want to
just one last point on that.
Yeah, go right ahead. I'm just putting myself back in the queue. Go ahead.
So when he came into court, he had printed out all these photos in like these huge poster prints, and people were attacking him. Well, oh, he's obviously an agent of the defense because look, he brought, and both attorneys were like, nobody asked him to do that. That's how much he wanted to help put the truth out there. And he said to me in private, I don't really have a dog in this fight, right? He offered his opinion to me on how he thinks the trial should end, but when he showed up, he didn't have, he wasn't on the Black Lives Matter side. He wasn't on the stop burning down our city side necessarily. He was just there as a neutral party to document what he saw. He brought all these exhibits because that he paid for with his own money. And that's just how willing that guy was to get the truth out there and just to say, hey, look, here's the photos I took. So I didn't just see it with my own eyes. You don't have to just rely on my memory, but here, look at these photos I took.
Yeah, and V Radio, if I may, I just want to get one more serious question in real quick.
Go ahead.
I have to ask, because with what has been going on in the country, like, obviously there was a lot of rioting and a lot of protesting and that sort of stuff, and the media was very clearly one-sided in that, where they were on the side of the rioters and the protesters. Did you have any fear, especially in hindsight, seeing about what the media did after the whole January 6th incident? Did you guys have any fear at the time that going out there and defending your community would put you in the crosshairs of obviously a media that is antagonistic towards your side of the aisle?
Well, yeah, anybody to the right of center always has that fear, right? And you know what, though? When I have my 10 and 11-year-olds sleeping peacefully and my wife in my bed, I don't really care what the media says, So, my neighborhood is one of those cookie cutter what do they call them? Suburban neighborhoods, and 4 entrances, 2 on one street, 2 on the other. And there was about 10 dudes on on all 4 entrances with ARs, shotguns, rifles. Nobody with any reason was going to enter my neighborhood that night. And that made a lot of folks sleep better. And we said, hell with the media. They can portray us as whatever they want. And that's what they did.
Yeah, they did.
But you know what? I don't think many of us really trust the media anymore, even those on the left. I mean, they make stuff up. Gage Grosskreutz admitted that he pointed the gun at Kyle's head before he was shot. And what was the media headline on all the mainstream media? Gage feared for his life. He
was surrendering.
Right. If I ran around with a gun during a riot and started pointing at people with AR-15s, you might say I'm looking to be killed too. I mean,
I have a big rant about the media's behavior incoming sometime in the stream. I'm sure we'll get to it eventually.
Well, after we've done a few rotations, we'll get to a point where we're just kind of open conversation. So did that finish what you needed to ask, Brunewski?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay, so what I wanted to, first of all, would be to comment that a lot of people are waking up now because of the media, and there are a lot of people on Twitter, for example, that are left-leaning people who are like, Jesus, I didn't realize he didn't shoot black people. And I was like, how did you not know that? But it also kind of points to the fact that racial profiling has been inversed in this country's narrative, because They made assumptions about who his victims must have been. They made assumptions about who he was. He's basically been profiled as a Trumper. Like, when I interviewed Lynn Wood when he was still on the case, he was his lawyer and he didn't even know what Kyle's political affiliations were. But there were all these assumptions being made that were irrelevant to the case. And that kind of points to the fact that, I bring back again what Johnny Walker said on one of his shows was this has become an issue of pride between political factions, and the truth is optional at that point. But bringing it back to, well, first of all, I want to say to everybody listening to this stream, I got 72 watching right now. Please smash the like button. And if you're on any of the other streams, smack the like button. Give it a good smack, as Logical Checkmate would say about Anthony Huber's skateboard. Because if you guys like what you're hearing, because this is a panel of people seeking the truth, if you like independent media, then you need to support it. Like, nobody's asked you to open your wallet, but doing things to help us with the algorithm really helps us out. So anyway, with that public service announcement, my question to you would be, have you ever had any dealings with the brothers who owned the Car Source? And more specifically, what is your perspective on whether or not they were telling the truth? And with a caveat that I'd like to add, that I've seen video of them talking with almost perfect American accents. And so then they're on the stand, and all of a sudden it was almost like they were trying to pretend to be poor immigrants who were just confused about what was going on. So, what is your assessment, of whether or not, they were affiliated? Like, basically, did they talk to your group in any way? Like, I don't know if you were around for that part of it.
Sure. And I've never really discussed this publicly, but I will tell you that me and a friend, an unnamed friend who's a Marine Corps veteran, we walked down the city, and that's where you saw those pictures of me with my Chuck Norris t-shirt, my camouflage shorts with my AR-15, and my buddy was armed. And we passed by Car Source, and we passed by the campus that had all the burnt cars. And actually, I'm telling you right now that Sam, the one with the glasses, came up to me and my friend, and he says, "Hey, can you guys guard our business tonight?" I said, What? I didn't, at the time, I didn't know they had 3 locations. I just saw the one. I knew it as Car Source. All the cars were toast. You could smell the rubber burning. They were burnt down to the chassis. And he asked us, he says, "Will you guys guard our business?" I said, "What business?" I said, "Everything's gone, man." I said, "Go home." I said, there's nothing left to protect. And I didn't know at the time. I know now that he was probably referring to the Car Doctor or Car Source 3, right? So he asked us to, and we politely said, "No, sorry. It's not what we're here for. We're here to just check out the situation, group up." And he was asked on the stand if he asked anybody to guard his business, and he said no. And right then I knew he was lying. So I didn't believe another word that came out of their mouth, because he asked me and my friend to guard his business, and he told the defense and the prosecution under oath that he had not asked anybody. So I can tell you firsthand, at least the one Sam lied under oath. I know that for sure. And it was very disappointing, because that's part of this whole narrative that the liberal media is saying is Kyle was protecting a business that he was not asked to protect. You're damn right he was asked to protect that business. And that's what we're left with. So they lied. I think the jury, was your business on fire? Can you repeat the question, please? Was your business on fire? Which day? It doesn't take a rocket scientist. Any one of those jurors, they're all reasonable people. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't be on the jury. They could see through that BS. Those 2 kids were lying. For sure, Sam, because he's the one I watched with my own eyes, ask us to guard his business. We respectfully said no. So those kids are lying.
That's kind of what I figured in looking at it, and I think they're lying probably to try to protect themselves from some form of liability, but somebody's microphone is getting an awful lot of noise.
Sorry, I'm going to go inside. It's the wind.
Well, you can just mute it while you're
Yeah, that's right.
while we're talking. That'd be fine.
You guys go ahead. I'm going to go inside anyways. It's getting colder.
Okay, no
Go ahead.
problem. So I guess to follow up on that, then I wanted to ask, we've kind of emphasized that these were not peaceful protests, and Matt Orfalia recently started a documentary project where he's literally just directly stating, no, they're not peaceful protesters, by showing all the video that there are so many people that apparently did not see of them doing things like attacking a children's dinosaur museum, because I am confident that attacking children's dinosaur museums will do a lot to fight racial profiling and will definitely deter police from shooting innocent people in the future, because destroying children's dinosaur museums is obviously a civil rights act. And yes, I'm being sarcastic. But can you talk a little further just to state like what the extent of the damage to Kenosha was, and how has it impacted Kenosha? Because one of the big points that I've recently made to leftists is that if you're concerned about poverty creating crime and therefore more interactions with police, it has been scientifically proven that rioting destroys local economies. So has Kenosha's economy felt the impact of this incident?
I'll answer that in a couple ways. First of all, I eat at Subway a lot. So I'm at the courthouse. I walk to Subway for lunch and I walk back to the courthouse, especially this week. So I'm talking about a 4-block radius. Evidence of the riots is everywhere you look downtown. The FUCK 12, FUCK pigs, F the police, BLM. It's all over the city. You can't walk through the city without seeing evidence of what happened to Kenosha, and we haven't gotten all cleaned up yet. So Kenosha, we just experienced our 14th murder of this year, 2021 to date. Damn. And that might seem, depending on what you think, Kenosha has 100,000 people, so it's a pretty big city. But I went back to 2001, I believe, right? 20 years. 5 5 5 5 4 3 0 2 5 5 4 3. It's never been over 5. Okay, so the average is like around 3.8. This year, it's almost triple last year, right? And of course, I'm not counting Huber. I'm not counting Rosenbaum, even though Kenosha police is. I don't count those as homicides because they're not. Unless he's convicted, then I guess they would be counted as homicides. But so our homicide rate just went through the roof after this, right? So while hundreds of reporters from all over the world were staying at a hotel here called the Stella in Kenosha, it's one of the upscale hotels, there was a gunfight 2 blocks from them in our downtown where over 70 rounds were fired and somebody lost their life. And this is while they're here covering the Rittenhouse case. So imagine you're a journalist from the Czech Republic or the UK or Scotland or New York, and you're sleeping in your hotel, and all of a sudden you hear 70 gunshots outside your window, and you hear that somebody was just gunned down 2 blocks from you. It's like, so is that a direct correlation? I don't know, but it's some evidence that suggests that Kenosha is going to continue to deteriorate. And we have a mayor who's a very progressive, and I think he's had like 3 or 4 public housing projects that he's sponsored and championed just in his last term of mayor since 2016. And I'm talking putting up these giant apartment buildings for low income folks. And some people need the help sometimes, but usually what follows, like with Cabrini Green, these concentrated high density areas of poor people, you usually don't see prosper come from there. It messes with the market rate of apartments and the economy, like you said. And so it's just Kenosha's heading in the wrong direction. And then after all this happened, I think you're onto something here, where I think we're going to start to see a pretty sharp, if not, steady decline in economic activity. I mean, who's going to want to come to Kenosha? Let's say, somebody from Illinois, we're on the border with Illinois, was thinking about relocating to Kenosha. After what they've seen, what reasonable CEO is going to say, yeah, let's go to Kenosha, where, there's gunfights, in their downtown, and where, you have these riots that the local politicians hid in their basements, like Bernie supporters. I mean, just doesn't make any sense. So And no offense to anybody who's a Bernie supporter here. It's just kind of a fun thing I like to say. But
Just me.
so I mean, it's just one of those things where I think you're onto something, and I think these riots are going to have long-term effects to our city, unfortunately, and until we get some leadership to stand up and say, hey, we got to do something here.
Allow me to take a mild follow-up, guys, just because did businesses leave? Like, I mean, I know that obviously some were destroyed. Do you feel that any are leaving? This is kind of like the crux.
And that's the thing is what you're seeing is you saw, so out of all the buildings burnt to the ground, a lot of them were multi-unit. So one building, 5 businesses, right? I can only think of 2 businesses that either rebuilt somewhere else or started leasing in another area. The rest disappeared. They just decided not to continue. And so what you have here is you have people that kind of just lost faith in the system, and now you're starting to slowly see businesses going out of business now, especially in the downtown area that the city has spent millions in consultants and studies and all this crap. And it's just it's sad. It's sad.
Johnny, it's your turn again.
Yeah, and as somebody who has consulted with cities on that kind of thing, I know how expensive it is. Can you clarify, and this is going to be a short question, but I'm going to follow up with something a little bit lengthier. Can you clarify about the insurance claim that the Kendrys made on the stand? I was under the assumption they were suing their insurance company to try to get covered. He went and said that they were covered.
Here's the interesting thing, okay? And I will say I have a strong belief, because I don't want to say it 100%, but these 2 brothers were asking for government help to pay for their losses, right? So it has been said that this business worked kind of as a consignment, where they would go to family members and business men and women and say, hey, do you want to invest some money? Sure, I'll give you $100,000. Okay, they'd take that $100,000, they'd go to the car auction, and they'd buy 12 cars. And they'd bring the cars back, fix them up, polish them, make them look nice, sell them, split the profit with the investors. So it is my belief that these business owners, the brothers, the dad, the mom, didn't own any of these vehicles. I think they were all kind of on a consignment system where the investors purchased the cars. So I don't think they had a big loss, but I think they have some investors that are kind of ticked off that they didn't have insurance, because they have been telling people that they have no insurance that covers those vehicles because they were not the owners of those vehicles. So I cannot say that with 100% certain, but you could probably trust that more than you could trust what they say. But to say you don't know, I mean, we're now 14 months later. To say you don't know if they're insured or not, come on. Nobody believes that. If my house burnt down, I'm going to know within 5 hours what's going to be paid for. I'm going to be on hold. I'm going to be calling. I'm going to be reading. So their disingenuous testimony is pretty obvious. But yeah, I really think that based on bad business practices, that's how they're screwed. Is they didn't set themselves up right, and you can't blame them. You can't put all the blame to them, because who envisions that there's going to be a riot and all your inventory of 140 cars are just going to be blown up? I mean, so it's a little bit of bad decision making and a little bit of terrible luck, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I've said in my one of my past videos that you're not going to find out what you're insured for until you actually have the disaster. And a lot of the times you are insured for what you're willing to pay for. And a lot of people have been making a lot of assumptions about how these businesses are insured, but it's all risk analysis. And so you can't assume that just because a certain store goes up in flames that the owner has insurance. Yes, you're required to have liability insurance. Well, that ain't going to cover you for something like this. So I have another question for you. Binger and Kraus, and I'd like you could kind of, answer these separately for these 2 guys. Why are they doing this?
Well, let's back up just a tad bit. So the original 2 prosecutors that were assigned to the case were T. Claire and Jason Zaff. So Jason Zaff is a younger attorney, far on the left, big-time liberal, but he was kind of launched into this equation, and he was not very comfortable with it because, they're remember, they're all attorneys, right? So they have an education. They're not idiots, right? They knew they couldn't prove this case, and in Wisconsin, it is unethical for a prosecutor to bring charges in which they know they cannot prove. And I think it's safe to say they committed that. They broke that rule here. So Jason Zaff was getting death threats, and he thought to himself, you know what? I didn't sign up for this crap. I'm out of here. And he resigned. Halfway through between when Kyle was charged in the trial, he said, I'm out of here. He left. He no longer at the DA's office. So then he gravely probably said, hey, who wants to draw the short straw? And James Krause started licking his fingers of the Cheeto debris and said, I'll take it, boss. And I'll take it. And so he was finishing up his lunch, and he probably jumped right on it and said, I'll take it, because he's just one of those idealists that just wants to put Kyle away, right? And so Krause wanted to ride the coattails, but, he's in court like this. Not because he's saying, oh, shit, we're losing, which they are, but just because he's so lazy that when you got a head that big, it takes some effort to keep it up. So if you can rest it on your hand, I think it helps him get through the day. But I digress. They're both intelligent, but they both know they can't win, so they're trying to push the envelope, and they're already coming up with excuses of why they're going to lose. They made that motion. Please don't let the defense attorneys call anybody a looter or a rioter, and the judge says no. That's not a precedented motion. So they're picking these battles that they know they're going to lose, so that they could say, hey, look, the judge was racist. How do you expect us to win? So they're already setting these little things in motion to where once they lose, they can say, oh, we did a good job. It should have been a conviction, but look, the judge is racist. People support vigilantism. They're already setting the ground for their excuses. So they know they're losing. These two boneheads aren't smart enough to know that they're being set up as patsies. And I don't know if they're trying to audition to be like a legal consultant on CNN or what, but they're doing a terrible job. They're the laughing stock of this world. And I don't know if they can see past their arrogance to realize that. I mean, these memes are out of control. I mean, I set up scrolling on Twitter for hours because I was laughing at all these memes. They're the laughing stock of this world, and they're both idealists. I think they might think that they can win this. I mean, I think that they are still holding out some hope, but they're smart enough to see that there's a strong possibility they're going to lose.
Can I ask a follow-up? Do you think that they think that Kyle is guilty?
Yes, and they don't think he's guilty because they think he violated the law. They think he's guilty because they don't like the AR-15s because they're scary looking. The jury instructions are very clear in Wisconsin. When the judge instructs the jury, he says you are to decide this case based on what the law is today, not what you feel the law ought to be. So Binger and Krause, or T. Claire and the Penguin, however you want to call them, these guys do not like the fact that you can walk around with an AR-15. They hate the fact that Kevin Mathewson has an AR-15 in my closet, locked up. They don't think it's legal. It should be legal. They don't think it should be legal to walk around with it in public. They don't think it should be legal to shoot somebody who's trying to take your gun. So you know what? They're gonna punish you because they don't like the law, right? And that's what T. Claire did, about 5 years ago. There was a trucker driving through Kenosha.
Guy Smith.
Guy Smith. He hit the scales. The trooper saw a gun right there on his passenger seat. It was in full view, right? The cop didn't really know what to do. He called. T. Claire was the on-call district attorney at the time, and he said, charge him with carrying a concealed weapon. And the trooper's like, hey, well, it's not really concealed. I can see it, but charge him anyways. So this guy had a gun rights group called Wisconsin Carry who defended him. And this lawyer, this federal court, civil lawyer, criminal lawyer, flew down from Georgia for the trial. In the morning of trial, T. Claire dismissed the case after he had, taken a plane flight and spent all that money. He doesn't like the law. He doesn't like guns and thinks we should not own them. So this is his way of getting back at the system.
And by the way, I featured that past dealio on one of my videos. It's hilarious. By the way, the judge, Bruce Schroeder, and T. Claire Binger really could not understand the law as written. It's idiocy. It's truly amazing.
Yeah, sure is.
So it would be Paul's turn now.
Yes.
Oh, for questions, actually, well, I don't have much of a question, or maybe in
You can also
Kenosha
take a
would do-
moment to comment on what we're discussing.
Yeah, well, that's mostly legal stuff and stuff like that, and so I'm trying to stay away out of it. But I would like to ask you, in Kenosha, what's basically the sentiment when it comes to Kyle in general? Kevin?
How does Kenosha feel about Kyle?
In Kenosha here, you kind of have the three camps, right? And I noticed my video froze, but I'll fix it.
That's okay. We can hear you.
I'm a ventriloquist. So, anyways, there's the three camps. You have the camp, the extreme left, which is the minority that thinks he's a murderer, belongs in prison. Screw Kyle. You have the camp on the far right, or even the moderate right, that says he's a hero, he needs to walk. And then you have those in the middle, like me. I don't think Kyle is a hero. I think he's a victim, right? I think it goes to show that the kid has some brass balls, that he carried an AR-15 in Kenosha when there was homicidal maniacs and pedophiles running around. But I think he needs to be acquitted. What he did was lawful, and he was damn good at it. I mean, that kid had some trigger control. He was on target. I mean, people might call me crazy, but I think there may have been a little bit of divine intervention there with this kid. I mean, this is a kid that went shooting with that gun one time, and I mean, he made some competition shooters probably, get a little moist. I mean, that was he did the right thing, and he was the better man. He won the 2-man quick draw competition against Gage Grosskreis, and so that you have those three camps, but the and remember, Kenosha is a liberal city.
Okay.
But the last two elections went to Trump. So how that happens, don't ask me, but it's interesting.
Yeah, if I may just quick follow up, do these three groups basically interact? Do they talk? Or do they just scream at one at another?
Hold on a second. They talk.
Oh, we lost him.
Okay, so could we? There he is.
Sorry. Yeah, so I mean, we have healthy debates out here, and this is the thing: is I work for attorneys on the far left, and I work for attorneys on the far right. So when you talk to people who have been in the courtroom with this judge, even my Democrat friend attorneys know that he's going to walk. So I think you have a higher population here in Kenosha of Democrats that want to see him acquitted because they felt they were victimized by these riots. So you have an abnormally large amount of Democrats in Kenosha that want this kid to go free because they were the victim. They were here. When you see burning, rioting, and looting on TV, it doesn't really hit you. But when it's your own city and it's your backyard and you see how real it is, it's pretty freaky. So you're seeing some compromise.
Okay, so Bernewski.
Well, I was scared Paul was going to take my question with how he started, but you kind of just answered it, to be honest. I was going to ask what the mood is in Kenosha regarding the rioters and the riots. But because, I mean, the way that I see it, I think that because of the, it's easy for all the talking heads to say, like, riots are the voice of the unheard and all that crap when it's not their city that's being burnt to the ground. So I was going to ask really what the mood was in Kenosha regarding the riots, and if you think that will have an effect on the outcome of the trial. I mean, I think it's an open and shut case anyways, but do you think that when it comes to the jury that will affect it at all?
Yeah, I think that will have an effect on the jury because everybody on that jury lives in Kenosha County, and everybody in Kenosha County was afraid because these out of state or out of area people that were threatening, they were threatening to come to the west side. So the west side is the rural area of Kenosha. So they were making all these very terrible threats like, hey, let's hit the west side. Let's go to the rural area and start looting and stuff. So throughout the county, you had people in fear. So every one of those jurors remembers the riots of 2020. So how that could not play a role in their deliberation, I don't know. I mean, I think now we're down to 18 jurors, and 6 will be at random kicked out. But I hope we get a fair jury, and things are looking good for the weapons charge, because now the judge is going to instruct them, unless the prosecution proved that it was less than 16 inches, you must acquit. So I'm feeling pretty good, and I think at worst, what you're going to see is a hung jury. That's going to be the worst possible. If you have two nuts, that are saying, "Look, Kyle's a murderer. I'm not going to acquit him," and you have those 2, let's say, and then you have the 10 who say, "Come on, he's the worst case scenario." So then you have this big decision: is big-headed Gravely going to charge this again? And you have to think about not only the cost to Kyle for another trial, but what about to the taxpayers? Because now we're going to have to rent the fence for $500,000 again. We're going to have to pay all this overtime for the cops, the jury, the prosecutors, the prosecutorial support staff. So going through this again will cost the taxpayers millions of dollars, as well as it's going to cost many hundreds of thousands for Kyle again. Maybe he doesn't have that much money. So, I mean, it'll be interesting if there's a hung jury to see what Gravely, the Black Lives Matter sympathizer, does. But I'm hoping he decides, if that happens, not to retry the case.
Yeah, and that's kind of my view as well. I think the worst case scenario at this point is a hung jury. I don't think there's a chance they're going to find him guilty on the major charges. But when it comes to whether or not they'll charge them again, when it comes to the cost of the taxpayers, I don't think they give a shit. And
they don't.
I think this is about ideology for them, and I think they're going to do whatever they can to try and get Kyle. They don't care about the facts. At least that's my view of it.
Maybe I'm under the wrong impression, but the fact that they brought in the lesser charges means they can't charge again.
No, that's not true. So they brought in the lesser charges for example, Huber. So Huber was it with the Huber charge, which I think was count 3, he was charged with first degree reckless homicide. Now on the table is also second degree reckless homicide and first degree reckless endangerment. The jury is prohibited by law from knowing the punishments, but even on the first degree reckless endangerment, I think that's a 20-year felony. So if the jury, the only thing that I'm worried about is some kind of compromise where the jury, maybe have 3 liberals and 7, 8, 9 common sense people. If they say, well, we can't come to a conclusion, or we can't come to an agreement, let's just compromise, let's just find him guilty of one of these lesser ones. That could still mean 20 years in prison. So, that if there's a mistrial, they can retry him. He would get the same judge, which is good for Kyle. But there's precedent of somebody being charged 10 times. So we still haven't.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was under the impression you were talking about in case of an acquittal on those charges that they would then.
Oh yeah.
Charge him again. But you're talking about a mistrial. Okay.
Yeah, acquittal cannot be cannot be appealed. So he's acquitted, done, end of story.
So I want to take my turn here. The first of 2 questions would be, 1, do you think that the current politicians of Kenosha will be held accountable for their, incompetence or standing aside and letting these things happen? And this would include not prosecuting, say, for example, Joshua Zeminski adequately for his part in all of this. Basically, do you feel that there will be any reckoning with your mayor, with your city council, etc.?
No, I don't think there will be. And they've taken steps to prevent that. So going through all the major politicians, you have the mayor of Kenosha, number 1. He shortly after this says, I am not running again. So in 2024, God, that's a long time away. He's not going to run again. So he'll be gone, right? So the people who will want to recall him, or the people who will want to see him pay, it's an easy excuse. Well, he's gone in 3 years. Just let it be, right? You have the sheriff who already announced he's not running again. You have the police chief who resigned pretty quickly. He's like, I'm out of here. Screw this. The county executive who said he is not seeking re-election and he's up for election next year. City council, that's the one that people don't understand, right? The city council could have the city council here in Kenosha has more authority than the mayor. So the city council could have called a special session and they could have taken action. I mean, they could have put out a call to arms to neighboring police departments, which should have been done the first night. I mean, there's cops from all over the state that would have been happy to come down here, make some overtime, and help their fellow, brothers in blue, as they call them, right? So I don't think you're going to see anybody held accountable. Gravely, the only thing that I think you might see here, and I hope you will see, is I think so. In Wisconsin, we have what's called the Office of Lawyer Regulation, OLR. They're responsible for disciplining attorneys. And I believe the judge in this case and or the two defense attorneys may just file charges with the OLR against Krause and Binger, especially Binger. So you might see him disciplined by the state bar for his two, post-arrest silence. I mean, that's a huge thing. And going into other acts, evidence that was disallowed, those are two grave constitutional errors. And if you remember, both of those questions, he got the entire question out. So when it came to the CVS thing, T. Claire says to Kyle, isn't it true in the past you said you wish you had your AR so you could protect property? The jury heard that freaking question, and you can't unring that bell, so to speak, right? So they're going now into the jury room while the judge reams, Binger, drapes him over his knees and slaps his butt. But they still heard that question. So when they're in the jury room, they're thinking, oh shit, did Kyle really threaten to use force on somebody for property? What? You can't unring that bell, right? So that's a very grave mistake. And then also when he's like, oh, isn't it true that this is the first time you're telling your story? Well, your silence cannot be held against you. And that's what he did here. And that bell cannot be unrung either. So you might see a surprise here too at the conclusion of, if the jury got it wrong here, you very well might see a judgment notwithstanding the verdict. In other words, if the jury says, we can't come together, I'm 99% sure the judge can say, you know what, you guys can't agree. I can. Charges dismissed.
Okay. That was a question I had, was whether that was legal in Wisconsin or not.
So
yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I want to follow up only in that it was another part of this, and I understand why people don't even tend to think about it. But what about your county sheriff? I mean, that's an elected position. Do you feel that their feet are going to in any way be put to the fire?
So here's the interesting thing, and I forgot to mention him, but yeah, he's one of those. He's a rhino. He's a Democrat, but he puts the R because he needs it to win. He has announced he's not running. But here's the interesting thing. So there are some lawsuits filed by Kimberly Motley. She's that wacko left-wing, hyper-partisan lawyer out of Milwaukee, I think. She's a civil lawyer. So she's suing the city, the county. And so they're going to be exchanging some discovery. So at least we might find out if there was a stand-down order, if it came from the governor's office, it came from the sheriff. So at least the positive side is we might be able to learn more because the sheriff's not talking about what's going on, right? He was interviewed for that New York Times documentary, as was I, and he didn't know how to answer basic questions. Well, what did you tell your deputies? I don't know. I was a blur. Come on. So the benefit of some of these civil lawsuits, even though I hope neither the county nor the city pay out a penny in settlement, we might be able to get some inner lookings of who failed us, right? So was it the mayor? Was it the county executive? Was it the sheriff? Was it the police chief? I don't think it was the police chief. He's kind of a no-nonsense guy that, was saying, hey, look, those armed citizens are out there. They have the right to be out there. Shut up, So to answer your question, I think none of them will be held responsible. Maybe Binger a little bit because he did violate the rules of professional conduct for attorneys and some Supreme Court rules. You might see him take a little heat, but that's not going to stop him from getting a job at CNN or one of those fake news media outlets.
So
precisely my thinking.
Yeah, I was going to say, I guess my follow-up question just about the state of things in Kenosha, I guess kind of already talked about how Kenosha is divided, that there's different camps about this. I guess my next question would be, what concerns do you have about, first of all, Kyle's safety after this? Is there's already been weird people who've been quoted saying they're going to do whatever it takes, even if they get shot. Like I just watched a video about that, and I don't have the perfect context, but supposedly he's a Kenosha resident. I guess what I'm worried about, people have apparently already said they'd like to Jack Ruby him or something. And do you feel, and then the last question that's kind of related to that would only be about, do you feel that there's a real threat of more rioting in Kenosha?
So the first question about Kyle's safety is I'm somewhat concerned about his safety, but usually these nut jobs who are sending letters to the judge calling him a KKK Klansman and Kyle needs to burn in hell. Usually those are not the type of people that you see carrying or owning guns, except for I guess the gangbanger element. But even the judge made a comment earlier in this trial. He said, "Look, I've been involved in many homicide trials in the 40 years he's been a judge. I've never seen anybody attack a judge, a juror, a prosecutor. I mean, of course, it's happened in this country, but it's not as common or as likely as you think it is, right? So, will somebody heckle Kyle if he's seen somewhere? Sure. Will somebody maybe try to punch him? Maybe. So there's definitely a concern for his safety. I think at some point it'll calm down. But what I'm more concerned about is his future, because he is a victim in all this, and he's not going to live the rest of his teens in a normal sense, where he's going to be able to, get a fake ID and go have some beers at the bar like a lot of us did. He's not going to be able to, do those normal things that an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid can do. So I'm concerned about his life and what comes up. So maybe he should run for Congress or something in, a real red state. I think, he's in the public eye. Yeah, right. He's in the public eye anyways. Maybe he should do that. And as far as future riots, it's always hard to foresee these things, because when they announced the Jacob Blake, where they weren't going to charge the officer, Kenosha, after have egg on their face, our local leaders, they rented the $500,000 fence, put around the courthouse. We had National Guard troops everywhere. We had cops everywhere, and nothing happened. So we're doing the same preparation here in the city and the county, where we have 500 National Guard troops right now staged just outside the county lines, ready for the verdict. We have cops from the police department, from the sheriff's department, ready, on call. So right now, I think they're making the right call with the benefit of egg on their face and realizing how badly they screwed up before. So will there be riots? I don't think so. But if there are, I hope they can arrest all those SOBs and punish them to the full extent of the law.
I apologize. I have one final question. I just don't want to forget it because I forgot it earlier. What has happened to the perception of the Jacob Blake shooting, especially now that it is obvious that the narrative was that Jacob Blake was some innocent man who pulled up and, was breaking up a fight between two women, and then was relieved that the police had arrived and was just trying to leave, only to find out that he was actually a rapist who was violating a restraining order that his rape victim had against him while trying to take her car with her kids in it, some of which were not his, and refusing orders to not go into his car, which is generally when most police officers get shot during traffic stops, is if you let them go back into their car. Has the attitude about Jacob Blake changed in Kenosha?
So for the far left, it's simmered down, but if you'd ask any of them, they'd repeat the same talking points. But in this case, you have a progressive far left prosecutor, in Michael Gravely, who said, I looked and there's nothing I can charge him with because I can't find any evidence. So when you have somebody who's a champion of the left saying there's nothing I could do, excuse me, I hope it's not the Delta.
Coof.
Yeah,
but anyways,
don't die of Wu flu on our sleeve. Okay? Continue.
But anyways, even the left, they start to get tired of fighting for a guy like that who, raped his girlfriend, the mother of his children. The details are out there. I can't repeat them. They're just so vile. They're starting to see, okay, maybe it's not a good idea to stick up for this type of guy, because there are, I'm not a thin blue liner. When cops do bad things, they need to be held accountable. When I was an alderman, I was responsible for getting at least 3, 4, 5 cops that were bad cops fired, and I was proud of that. So I'm not this defend all cops attitude, but in this case, you had a progressive, far left, extreme prosecutor, meeting for lunch and breakfast with Black Lives Matters, and he could not find a way to charge him. So the left kind of died down with their, Jacob Blake, because now it's all about Kyle Rittenhouse, and it was mentioned earlier. Oh, it's race. When in the history of this country has a white guy shot 3 white guys and been called a white supremacist? It makes no sense. There's no race element to this. So what do? They make it up. They interject it where it doesn't exist, right? So Jacob Blake, I think the left is starting to realize, okay, the guy's a creep. He's now got tons of money, right? He's suing the city. The city is very, very...
They'll buy him off.
Yeah, they're very, very settle. They like to settle. I was an alderman. I saw, my colleagues, what they like to do. They just like to buy off these lawsuits. So, I hope the city and the county stand fast against these. But yeah, Jacob Blake, I mean, it's dying down. It's starting to be like, how are you going to protect some guy who's, attempting to, take off with a knife? He's got felony warrants and just put everybody else's lives at risk, including his kids. I mean, you got to expect something bad's going to happen. And if you don't, you're insane.
And I'd have to say it worked out pretty good for him to show up and break all of those laws, because now he's a millionaire. So let's go. I want to do like one final round, and then we'll just open discussion and kind of like start to address questions. What I would want to do is we'll address questions from the audience, and everybody will have an opportunity to comment on them at that point. I just wanted to make sure we had this, one more structured round of questions. So Johnny, it's your turn.
Okay, so the last session in court, they had a lot of talk about the video footage that apparently, at least according to the prosecutors, showed Kyle pointing his rifle at Zeminski. Now, a lot of evidence has come about since then, and Logical Checkmate and Neil have of V Radio have both shown this on their channels that pretty well disproves that. The jury is deliberating Monday. This is, and I watched these videos, and I think I sent them to you, Kevin. It's obvious when you watch them that the prosecution got this wrong. I'm not saying that they did it on purpose. I think that confirmation bias led them to think that what they were seeing was real, but it wasn't. Although I think, Paul, you probably disagree with that. Whatever the case, it doesn't really matter. But what can you do at this point? I mean, is there a way to contact people to let them know that there is this evidence now? Well,
the only thing left now is closing arguments. So the lawyers can only talk about what's been introduced as evidence. So right now they're probably scouring court TV at the record to see what has and hasn't been introduced. But the benefit of me being in the courtroom every day is I get to see what you guys from all over the world don't, is I get to look at the jury, right? Mm-hmm. And when they were going back and forth about pixels and what does this show, the jury was, they were fixing their nails and they weren't taking notes and they were yawning. They don't give a shit. The case has already been proven. And now this last ditch, if the prosecution just gets evidence, they still have a right to present it, even though the defense didn't get enough time because they just got it. How could they have been expected to give it to the defense? But in this case, it's not new evidence. It's the same evidence being manipulated, right? So that's open to interpretation. It could be Kyle pointing a gun at Zeminski, who, by the way, is a violent, multiple felon dirtbag. I bet you guys didn't guess that. Who was holding a gun in his hand. So if Kyle did point his gun at him, so what? The guy was armed and was pointing his gun all over that night. He's facing a felony for arson, but it also could be a unicorn, for crying out loud. So I really think it's much ado about nothing, because I don't think the jury gives a shit about what may or may not be in that ultra enhanced 20-hour photograph. I used to be a wedding photographer. I have experience with Photoshop. I know you can really make anything look like anything. But I watched the videos you gentlemen put out, and it's amazing how you guys are able to do that stuff. But at this point, I don't think the jury cares. I think that the defense is going to make a strong argument that, hey, look, this is 11th hour evidence. And we're talking about beyond a reasonable doubt. When you're looking at a pixelated stick figure in the dark taken by a drone 300 feet away and enhanced, that's not beyond reasonable doubt. So
It literally looks like Pitfall from the Atari 2600 with a gun in his hand.
yes. So I don't think the jury cares about that. And that's what the prosecution is going to focus on. And I think they're going to lose the jury's interest. They're going to say, oh, look, there's this photo. They're clinging to straws. They want to see one of these felonies stick, but I don't think you're going to see any of them stick. You're never going to be able to convince 12 people that Kyle murdered or tried to murder anybody that he wasn't entitled to do legally.
All right, Paul, your turn.
I would like to ask the night of the 25th, when the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting happened, we heard during the trial Dumbbell Binger was saying that the riots and the fires weren't as bad. So from that, I deduced that, the armed civilians standing around probably worked. Is that the sentiment in Kenosha, that the armed civilians made a difference on that night?
100%. And I'll just tell you a little quick anecdote is the neighborhood that I live in, some friends of mine lived in this neighborhood, and we just moved to this home that I'm sitting in right now. God, it was 2 weeks before this, right? So we're brand new to this neighborhood, and then all this stuff happens. And when we were out there, guarding the neighborhood entrances, my friend who's a Democrat says, look, he private messaged me on Facebook and said, hey, I don't want to put this out there publicly because I don't want to look like a Republican, but we appreciate what you guys are doing out there. We feel safer. My wife is happy. Thank you for being out there, right? And so, Paul, what you saw was the defense harping on that, saying, so you're saying on the 24th, tons of fires, a little bit of armed guards, and on the 25th, you had lots of armed guards, little fires. He's harping on that. He's setting the stage for his closing arguments to say, look, when the good guys showed up, the bad guys left. Kyle was outnumbered, but he was not outgunned. And like I said, he had the skill, maybe the little divine intervention. He prevailed. The bad guys did not. Happy ending.
All right, Bernuski.
To be perfectly honest, I don't really have any more questions for Kevin. I'm more just looking forward to getting into discussion.
All right, no problem. I do. So the first of which would be now that now that this has all come down. Like, for example, there was, because I follow, I'm part of a group of people that, along with Mary Todd, spend a lot of time exposing Antifa and their activities. There were Antifa accounts that are openly saying that in the event that there's a not guilty verdict, that the cities are going to burn. And I just kind of have a gut feeling, but I don't know for sure, but I have a gut feeling that there are more riots in this situation, that it's probably not going to go as well as they think. So my question would be to say now, do you feel that the citizens of Kenosha have had enough of this crap and that there's going to be more people standing up to rioters if this happens? Or, I mean, I guess you guys have National Guard there now. Maybe the police and the politicians have figured out that that they need to just go ahead and stop the riots this time. Because that's, when I was listening to Kevin Glowicki's Scream, Never Stop Voices, and he was complaining and saying that he blames the whole thing on the cops not doing enough. And I said, okay, but if the cops had done something to stop your riot, you would instead be writing articles about how it's all about police brutality, breaking up a peaceful protest. So I guess to get back to my questions then, do you feel the citizens of Kenosha have had enough of riots and that would likely more people would stand up armed if necessary? 2, do you feel confident that maybe instead the police and the National Guard will actually have to do what it takes, to stop this riot?
Well, that's the most important question of our stream here. Is, let's just say hypothetically Kyle is convicted and sent to prison for life, and let's say that they riot anyways because they're all here. We're all dressed up in our riot gear. What are we gonna do? Well, let's riot anyways, right? who is going to want to go out there and defend anybody when you see what happened to this kid who had 3 textbook self-defense shots? It's going to discourage people because I don't want to end up like Kyle. And that kid had millions of people around the world send him money. Thank God. Otherwise, he'd be sitting in jail tonight, right? So if you see Kyle get convicted, the American public will lose faith in the fundamental principle of self-defense, right? And that's really what's at stake here. And that is the worst possible outcome for Kenosha, for Wisconsin, for this country, and for the whole world, right? Someone is chasing you and they're trying to take your gun from you that you're legally possessing. You can shoot them. Somebody points a little girly Glock 40 subcompact at your face, you can legally shoot them. Somebody takes a skateboard and tries to chop your head off twice with it, you can legally shoot them. But if this jury and these prosecutors get a verdict of guilt of murder, we're going to lose faith in the fact that we can protect our lives, which is the fundamental right that we have as Americans is, do not tread on me. And so I think if you get an acquittal, which is likely, I think this city, this county is sick and tired of these thugs. And I think you're going to see a lot more people standing up. My wife won't let me get involved, so somebody else is going to have to step up. But yeah, I think you're right. I think the people of the city are sick and tired. They want to move on, and these rioters are not going to be well welcomed. They're not going to be welcomed at all. So,
well, I hope you're right. And I guess the second question would then though be: do you feel that the police and the National Guard are actually going to step up this time?
I hope so. So, we're starting out with a higher number. We're starting out, what's the word I'm looking for? We're starting out at the advantage, right? Because we have advance notice. They caught us off surprise on August 23rd, right? They caught us off guard. We were surprised. When I say we, I mean as a community. But this time we're prepared. So I hope the city, I hope the county, I hope the FBI, who, by the way, was flying planes over Kenosha that night. I mean, and they lose data. They lose a USB drive that has evidence of exoneration or conviction of murder. I mean, when I was a kid, you used to look up to the FBI, right? Oh man, the FBI, what a great institution of these fine Americans. But we've lost faith, right, in the FBI. We see the text messages between the lovers that were both married that wanted to stop the election. We see this dossier that they knew was false. So we're starting to lose faith in the most special institution, the most elite institution that we're brought up to believe. They were out there that night. Did they have informants? I mean, what was going on? So hopefully now we're prepared. Hopefully the FBI is on the ground right now getting intelligence. I hope they're walking around downtown, plain clothes, shopping, pretending to, spying, gathering intelligence. I hope that's already set in motion. I hope we're so over prepared that even a whiff of, a Molotov cocktail is just, boom, you're done. You're in handcuffs. You're being charged. So that's what I hope to see. Whether that's true or not, time will tell. But I think you're going to see an acquittal. And if we're prepared, I think you're going to see, probably only peaceful, annoying extremists out there yapping.
That was kind of the impression I got, was it almost seemed like Black Lives Matter in Kenosha fizzled out because of all of these protests I've seen outdoors. It's like a dozen or so people at most. It doesn't, it's definitely, I mean, is there, I guess that's kind of like the last follow-up in regards to this, is like the presence of Black Lives Matter, like, are they even relevant now? Because the protests going on outside the courtroom look pathetic.
And that's the problem, right? They're not relevant. And the other day, as I was walking out of the courthouse, court was just adjourned, and there's maybe 15 weirdos out there, just Black Lives Matter. And I'm thinking, do you not know what trial is going in here? There was not a black person in the room testifying. I mean, there was not. This is not about race, right? And so, the media zooms in real close, so it looks like there's a ton of people. Oh, protesters. they want, you know, they want to make it look like it's this big group of people, but it's not. So even if it has fizzled out and they've lost their clout, or if they even had any to begin with, it's the media can make it look how they want, you know. So that's why you got citizen journalists and stuff like us, you know, on this thread who want to document that, you know, and zoom out and say, okay, look, there's only 5 dudes there that are, you know, screaming, you know, mumbling, you know, incoherently. So yeah, I think they're dying down, and this will be a big blow to their movement, right when they see justice work how it's supposed to, and then they're going to start blaming the judge, the jury, the prosecutors. They're going to blame everybody except these 3 career criminal violent people who tried to attack a 17-year-old boy.
And don't forget Joshua Zeminski.
Right.
Yeah,
Actually,
exactly.
that's perfect, because the first crowd question I have right now is from Alan Conrad on that issue. Give me just a second here for station identification. If you're listening on my stream, you were listening to V Radio. If you guys want to check out my website, v-radio.us, you can join my various social media, as I'm getting more reports that people are not getting their notifications when I go live or produce new content. I'm also on BitChute, Telegram, Discord, Facebook, all of that information. You can email me. There were people who were trying to get me critical information at like 3 a.m. last night, and YouTube just keeps deleting their comments. As far as like for everybody else here, you know, if any of you guys, you know, make sure, you know, encourage your people to, you know, I'm not trying to make a fortune here at all. I don't. I've got like $200 of patrons, you know, a month, and that's it. But, you know, if this is what you guys want, then you're going to have to support it. You know, if you want this kind of media, you want the kind of hours that we put into investigating this stuff, to getting the structuring all of the videos for you, in many cases takes hours of research. Like for a 15-minute video the other day, I literally spent the whole day looking at it. So if you guys want this, then you got to show, you know, your support for it. In addition to that, just simple things like the algorithm. I got 115 people on my stream right now, and I got 79 likes. Thank you for all the likes I do have. But hey, just click the like button, man. You know, even if you don't necessarily agree with everybody on this panel, you wouldn't even be allowed to listen to this conversation on the mainstream media. So anyway, with that said, first question that I grabbed was from Alan Conrad. He first asked, you know, what's the deal with Zeminski? And then he said, was he subpoenaed? Did he just not show up, or took the fifth? Did I miss where the defense talked about his involvement? Now, I want to, because we're now moving into kind of open discussion format, so I want people to be able to talk. I know that it's important. I know if you guys don't have a lot of experience on a panel of this many people, you just got to kind of police yourself to a certain degree. I will reserve the right to be sure that if, like, I heard somebody maybe start to talk and they didn't get to say anything, that I'll bring it up. Try to watch your body language. But anyway. Yeah, so my first comment was, as in regards to this issue, is that it seems to me like both sides probably decided that Zeminski is such a non-credible witness. I don't think you're going to get any value out of him out of either of them, but I also suspect that I honestly don't feel Binger is in good faith about this brandishing issue. I don't feel it at all. And I think that he was hoping that he could create, you know, a what if in the minds of the jury with a blurry picture. You know, like as if you were trying to sell a UFO photo to somebody, or a photo of Bigfoot. Don't you see the outline here? Let me tell you a story about this ink blot picture. It's a Rorschach test. You know, so putting the Zeminskis on the stand at that point creates another problem for him, because if their testimony is bad, or more importantly, when they finally did give testimony and he just annihilated them as far as their credibility with like Zeminski's 7 pages full of criminal history, you know, I feel that they probably felt that he was entirely too, like, they're just too much of a wild card in putting those 2 people on the stand. And I say that as somebody who's communicated with Zeminski in my comment section. He doesn't seem too bright. So go ahead, guys.
So yeah, okay, Zeminski.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Zeminski was on both witness lists, and he was there. He was in court. And in Wisconsin, pleading the fifth is not permitted to be done in front of the jury. So he's got open cases, one for felony arson, one for, he really got overcharged on this one. He shot the gun in the air and gravely charged him with disorderly conduct for F's sake. But he has open cases, so he has the constitutional right to plead the fifth, which is not done in front of the jury, and in this case, not even done in front of the court. So he wasn't called because he doesn't have to testify, but he was there, that dirtbag. I got a picture of him, and he may be one of the bigger people when we're placing blame around for this incident.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's sunk into him that your decision to fire that weapon may have gotten your friend killed. And I think he's just too stupid to realize that. I think V Radio, you've had discussions with him, haven't you?
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. I mean, just that he was commenting on my YouTube video, and the main reason I believe it was really him is, aside from the fact that just the stuff he was saying, he was giving me all these details about things going on in his life and his domestic violence charges and stuff like that. I'm like, if this is just some random YouTuber, I don't think he would have made, went through the effort. And then the way he conducted himself and talked about it and all that, it led me to the conclusion. I'm like, nah, and I told my viewers, I'm like, you make your own decision on this, but I get a gut feeling that this is him. But regardless, that's the answer to your question. So continue with the panel.
Okay, so here's my take on it. I don't think even if he didn't want to plead the fifth, I don't think the defense wants him up there because he's liable to say anything. I don't think the prosecution wants him up there because he is the perfect embodiment of what the jury hates in terms of destroying that community. So to have that person as your witness, I think the jury would make the connection that the prosecution must be all pro violence and all that kind of stuff. So I just think that both sides really just didn't want him.
And to be perfectly honest, like, to me, I think as a jury member, I'd be thinking it says a lot because other than Richie McGinnis, they were the two closest witnesses to the shooting. And the fact that the prosecution didn't even call them up to, give their side of the story as to why Kyle would be guilty, I think that's a pretty damning statement of itself. I mean, if these two were the two closest people to the shooting and they saw Kyle's actions immediately leading up to the shooting, why would the prosecution not call them?
Well, there's a Fifth Amendment issue, though. And
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, if I may, I have I love just the double standard when it comes to Kyle and Zeminski from the media, and also the prosecution definitely, and that is that now plenty of people basically are saying, hey, white privilege at its finest, right? When it comes to Kyle, he has the judge on his side, etc. You know what I mean? All the funds that he managed to raise, and I'm like, guys, if you would want to talk about something like that, why are you not talking about Zeminski, who literally shot the gun in the air and he's charged with disorderly conduct or whatever that is, which it's not even a felony, right? That's a misdemeanor.
Yeah, and it's a weak misdemeanor. It's a 3-month misdemeanor. The most he can get is 3 months in jail, and the sheriff gives him work release.
Yeah. He's lived a charmed life as far as the judges have been concerned. He's been nailed for many, many things, and they always seem to give him very little.
Yeah, that's been my question from the beginning. Why the hell is he still walking around? How can you be that much of a repeat offender and just be walking around? I'm sorry.
Here's the ironic part: is his wife is in prison right now. So
yeah.
Listen, his wife, who was present during the riots, was on probation. You can't make this crap up. She was on probation for shoplifting. Since she was with him during the riots, she got her probation revoked. She's now in prison. He shot the gun. She was just filming it like an idiot. She's in prison. He's walking around drinking Four Locos. It doesn't make sense.
That is the U.S. justice system. We got more criminals than we can put in prisons. They just walk the streets.
And here's the thing is when they charged him, they originally only charged him with disorderly conduct, right? That's it. So then I kept, putting out the stories about why isn't he being charged with more, and then finally they charged him with the felony. So it took public scrutiny for him to even be charged with the felony. They were just going to do a misdemeanor, which would have got pled. He would have got probation. And the guy's been on probation like 12 times. Probationary needs are long.
And a bail jumper, a bunch of bail jumping. What the hell? When do you just stop giving people bail? I don't get it. I just.
Oh, and that's the problem here in Kenosha. You got these people who are out on bail 7 times over. And it's eventually
DUIs. Oh my gosh, you guys are car driving, drinking, sons of guns out there.
If we're going to talk about anybody who should not have been there that night, because that is the charge that people make about Kyle Rittenhouse all the time, Joseph Rosenbaum, there is no reason that he should be a free person like
Zeminski.
at all. Like no, I'm talking Joseph Rosenbaum, the person who started started it with Kyle. I know we're talking about Zeminski, but just when it comes to like people who weren't supposed to be there, criminals, and why are they out of jail? Rosenbaum obviously, got his troubles early on in life that we all know they're awful. But he was in a mental hospital because he threatened suicide after, I believe, beating his fiance. Like, how is he not in jail for that? For what reason is there for him to be out in public? That's just insane to me. But again, that's our criminal justice system.
Right, and if I may, because now I will be going to Bern and Kevin, because Kevin said that Zeminski is one of the people that deserves a lot more blame than he's receiving, and Bernski now why Rosenbaum was walking. The party that is not receiving like any at all blame, which is like bonkers to me, is the mental hospital that released Mr. Rosenbaum into Kenosha, because he was somewhere outside of Kenosha, right? And they like, what was the thinking process? Because they called his fiance, oh yeah, we have here your extremely violent fiance, like what meds is he talking? What worked in the past? You know what I mean? Okay, this worked. They I don't know, like how did they just take some pills, throw it at him, like and see what stakes, and then oh yeah, let's drive him to this, like a city on fire with shit tons of violence. This violent person, bipolar person, why nobody was like, boss, can we keep him for a night or two? Maybe that's like literally pouring gasoline on fire.
And that's the thing, is they didn't even give him any medicine, right?
Yeah.
Mental health is real. I mean, we all believe that, right?
Yeah.
Mental health is a real thing that, people need to be treated for. And this guy, you said it pretty well. They literally kicked him out their door, gave him a bus ticket to a town that was on fire. They knew he was violent. They knew he was mentally ill. They don't give him medicines. And they kind of says, hey, go to Kenosha. We want to keep Milwaukee, the murder capital of the country, a little less murdery, I guess. I don't know.
If I were to give a guess, I would say that this is without any knowledge of the case, but if I were to say the reason that they didn't keep him, it's probably because he doesn't have any money that they could extract from him.
So now,
I think there was a
there
COVID
more points on
excuse
this?
at the
Go ahead,
time.
Johnny. Go ahead.
I think there was a COVID excuse that was given out early. I have no idea if it's credible, but that's what I heard.
Somebody was pregnant. I know that.
Yeah. Spiraling back to Zeminski, can you clarify about the charges? Because I know that originally he was charged with a gun charge for firing the gun, and then that was dropped. And then there was an arson charge that was brought in with a disorderly conduct with a weapon, but the criminal complaint mentions nothing about a firearm. Can you clarify that for us?
So yeah, I watched your video.
It's probably wrong.
I was trying to. I think I sent you an email, or I intended to, but so you and I don't blame you for getting it wrong, because it's confusing. So what happened was they charged him with disorderly conduct. That's all, right?
Okay.
Then at one of the hearings, Binger says, Judge, we're going to be moving to dismiss this because we're filing new charges that contain a felony. So they dismissed the original charge. Then they refiled that charge along with a felony. So the disorderly conduct for firing a gun in the air, although was dismissed, it was then recharged. Same facts. So right now I'm looking online. He has three charges open: a felony I, which is the lowest felony. I think it's maybe 3 years in prison most. Arson of property other than building, disorderly conduct with the use of a dangerous weapon enhancement, and obstruction of an officer. I believe, since this is a Schrader case, after hearing all this crap about Zeminski being a scumbag, I would not be surprised if Schrader maxes him out. And if he's maxed out, he'll get some prison, and that would be a beautiful thing, because that's where he belongs, is in prison.
And Schroeder is kind of called the hanging judge, isn't he? Isn't he kind of considered tough?
Very, very fair in the courtroom. Always very fair to both sides. But once they get you guilty, he throws the book right at your face.
Okay, so we can say with pretty good certainty that Zeminski is being charged for the gun charge of firing it. Okay, I got to do some apologies on mine, but it's not my fault. I have just found out that from this last year, that the writing is extraordinarily sloppy in this legal stuff. You know, I mean, to have a criminal complaint and not mention a firearm, even though it's supposedly a firing of a firearm that causes it, it's just really confusing. So
And
it's
we
not
go
my
back
fault.
to that. It's laziness.
Yeah.
You know, they copy
So-
and paste from the police report to the criminal complaint.
So the question that has been highlighted is also in line with the question from my chat from somebody named Iva. And I guess it's a question that you said you've been in the courtroom. I think it's interesting that Zeminski showed his freaking face there. I wasn't aware of that. But, you know, Iva's version of it is, since your guest has been in the courtroom the whole time, what is your opinion or take on the feel of the jury?
So the jury is a fairly old jury. So I'm 37, and I think there's one or two people that are my age or a little younger, and the rest are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. Okay, so hopefully that brings with them some wisdom, right? There's one Hispanic male. Other than that, they're all white. And, you know, I'm an investigator, so I pick up things and analyze things that other people might think I'm crazy. But out of the 18 jurors, only 4 of them have been wearing a mask. So I'd like to think that those not wearing a mask are more on the right, and those wearing a mask are more on the left. So, I mean, that's just one little piece of evidence, and it could go either way. But, you know, usually, you know, I'm vaccinated. So, you know, I got the Dollar General one, Johnson & Johnson. So I guess I'm supposed to have my period or something. But
You'll become a real woman now.
You know, I'm vaccinated because I trust Americans who do this science stuff. I took it on my own accord, not because the government told me. But, you know, these jurors were told, because this judge, he hates the masks, right? And he says, wear a mask if you want, but you don't have to. And so you saw the jurors just rip the masks off in relief. And I'm like, okay, those ones are conservative. Those ones are acquittal votes. And the 4 that are wearing the masks, a couple of them are pretty elderly to where maybe they have some kind of underlying condition. So I noticed that. I noticed that when Kyle was being cross-examined by T. Claire and just being badgered the whole time, the jury didn't like that. They don't like Binger in my surmising of their body language. They just don't. And remember, OJ's jury expert has been sitting 2 down from me this whole trial. So she's been taking notes, and she helped them pick the jury. So the jury is older. They're white, and they kind of look like Harley Davidson, like a lot of them. So I think these are going to be people that are going to, you know, they're going to say, let this kid go. And that's
was there any direct reaction when Kyle started crying? Did you notice any body language changes?
Yeah, you know, they were upset because at the same time, so I've been sitting next to Wendy Rittenhouse throughout the trial. She's Kyle's mother. You know, she couldn't help it. I mean, they're trying to put her freaking kid in prison. I mean, it's just so sad.
Yeah, she looked crushed.
And the jury seemed very, very sympathetic to Kyle. I mean, he's got a set of brass balls too. I mean, he got on that. Many people said he didn't need to go up there on the jury stand. The state did not prove their case. He didn't need to go up there, but you know what? He went up there. He stood his ground. Because imagine if that was one of us 5 opinionated assholes up there, we would have been barking back at T. Claire saying, "Hey, you little metrosexual, you know, blah blah blah." What would you have done? Would you just crawled into a ball and sucked your thumb? No, you know. So I mean, Kyle showed some restraint, and I'm proud of the way he testified. And I think the jury was sympathetic to him as a kid who was scared.
I do want to comment only in that I think it's sad that we have to divide something like this in lines of right versus left. Like, and it's funny because at the beginning of my documentary, I literally post a picture of my Bernie Sanders ballot. And I did that. Unfortunately, that meant that some right-leaning people immediately turned off my documentary. But I did it because I was so sick of people saying, "You're a right-wing Trump, blah, blah." Like, because I'd done 5 versions of the video at that point. And I had so many people just say, "No, you're on the right, you're conservative." And I was like, you know, I just needed to identify myself like, look, guys, there's the truth and then there's not the truth. And I think there's just way too many damn people who want him to be guilty by virtue of his politics,
Yes.
by virtue of what they perceive his politics to be. Like I said, when I interviewed Lynn Wood, it was like he didn't even know what Kyle's politics were. It wasn't necessary. It wasn't relevant, and I think that it's unfortunate that, and you see this especially like when I just did a video about that Twit, who's a Twitch streamer, Bad Bunny or whatever, and she had this list of things that if you hear anybody arguing in the Kyle trial, then it means they're fascists. And there were basic things like due process, like if you think Kyle deserves due process. And it just basically what I'm dealing with when I go on Twitter is that, for one thing, people are still saying the same debunked crap that they were in the first nights of, like, literally as it was going on. So like stuff that has been disproven, like almost what are we almost a year now? Like I don't remember like how long has it been. Has it been a year?
Happened in August, I think. So it's been a year and what, 2 months, 3 months?
A year.
Right.
It'll be a year and 3 months and a week.
And then there are still people who believed because of the media that he shot black people. There are still people who believe that he just fired into the crowd. There are still people who believe, that he was just there to kill people, have zero evidence of that. They just keep repeating it like, the Nazi propaganda minister repeat the big lie crap, and then it's gotten into the public consciousness. And now I'm happy to say that more people are starting to get it, but it's frustrating because I work all this time on trying to make people aware. But what I more or less discover is like, because she was giving this list as a public service announcement to people that she feels politically aligned with, that if anybody makes any of these arguments, you should block them and not speak to them at all. And I'm like, okay, so if anybody asks about due process, block them and don't speak about them to them at all. And then another one was the evidence of the case. So if anybody talks about the evidence of the case, block them and do not speak to them at all. And that's an example of why I agree with you when you say that this isn't just it's not just about Kyle Rittenhouse anymore. It's about the soul of the United States. It's about so many other things are at stake here, and it's just terrible. Anyway, rant over.
If I may, Neil, quickly I commented on your video. I don't know if you've seen that. If people ever like that lady that basically says, "Hey, block them, don't engage whatsoever in any discussion, get into any real positions of power." Well, the problem resolution will be only violence then. There will not be anything else. If you disagree, basically if you cannot even discuss something as fundamental as is self-defense or whatever, like basically what is on video, like this is how like wars are started. I'm sorry, but it is just like that.
Yeah, they're providing the best argument for why we have a Second Amendment is to prevent people from gaining power and then acting on those tyrannical impulses. And that's what it is. That's tyranny. They just want their brand of tyranny.
Yeah, and if I can piggyback on to what V Radio talked about before, about how people have been kind of misled from the start on this by the media, I want to ask you guys, have you noticed, and do you think it's rather interesting that kind of the more fringe left media purveyors, such as like the Young Turks, Vosh, Brown Fabio, Hassan, or whatever his name is, they've kind of started to admit that even though they still think he's immoral, they think Kyle is going to be found not guilty. Yet in the mainstream press, they haven't really turned that page. They're really coming out more hard against Kyle now than any time we've seen. Do you think it's odd that I guess you could say, left-wing media with less institutional credibility have kind of taken a turn, and the institutional media has not?
Paul, someone want to take it?
I apologize. Coalesce your question one more time. I had to do something.
I'm sorry.
Saying that. Go ahead.
It seems like the non-institutional left-wing media has really taken a turn on how they view this case. For instance, Vosh, Hassan Piker, TYT,
right,
they've gone from guilty to, okay, he's probably not guilty, but still morally wrong. Meanwhile, in the mainstream, it seems like they're pushing the guilty stuff more than ever. What do you think the reasoning is for that?
Well, let me type in, just because I'm probably the only like left-leaning person on the stream.
Whoa,
the
Paul
way-
looks like what?
like,
No,
but
not
the-
Now he's
really.
mad.
oh, okay. So, well, Paul can give the Czechoslovakian version of it, but I
Now he's
guess
really mad.
what I was gonna
Oh,
say,
man.
what I was gonna say was just that the way that the left media is handling this is just absolutely ridiculous. Like the Rational National, that's another guy that he only did one video about it, and he said so much shit that was utterly inaccurate, and then just went and said, "This is why I don't cover these things." I'm like, "Yeah, you're not covering it right now either, you freaking moron!" Like he didn't know what he was talking about, and I think that basically, just like a lot of other things, as I'm kind of understanding as I work in the algorithm, for example, I know I have left leaning viewers, but there are certain things that are expected of you. Like that's why the way my approach to things in this show is like you're not going to agree with everything I say, and if you don't like it, go somewhere else. So I end up with, ironically, plenty of right wing viewers too, probably more. I mean, if I polled them, it would probably be more, but the kind of left wing people that do tune into this are the ones who don't have their head up the media's derriere and or are not in the brainwashed woke cult. And that unfortunately is a minority as far as those who will admit who they are. I guess would be the way to put it, is that the culture on the left right now it's starting to get pushback. Like people like Bill Maher, for example, are starting to go after the woke and all of that because and I think it's unfortunately because the Democratic Party recognizes that this is no longer in their best interest, not for any actual like commitment to the truth. The Black Lives Matter and Antifa were their useful idiots for their purposes when it came to being able to say, let's burn the city down and then do videos about how this is Trump's America. Like it was all about the election. And I guess so when I say certain things are expected of you, Destiny is one of the only major YouTubers who is viciously pro Kyle because he watched what happened and he said it openly.
From
And
the start.
he takes crap for it, but he just is fearless about it and gives it right back. And that's the way I handled it too. And I think that for me, from my perspective, it does the left no good at all to constantly lie in easily verifiable ways. It doesn't help the left whatsoever. People like Vosh, people like the Serfs, people like Sam Cedar, who just line up, and the Young Turks is basically just the Fox News of the progressive movement. They craft a narrative because they think that's what people want to hear. And that's what was going on. It's what the mainstream media already does. And unfortunately, it's what YouTube media is doing as well. And I accept the fact that that means that my subscriber list is going to be smaller. But most of these people, a lot of them are extremely money oriented. And if you, in an emotional situation like this, if Vosh says something stupid about Kyle Rittenhouse and gets himself a $50 super chat, then that's his motive. It's not even in their best interest, basically, to tell the truth in this subject because the audience on the left that is willing to openly support the truth in this subject is very small. And I think it's growing. That's clear. But and I promise I'm almost done. But there's a lot of pressure, and I think, and this is something I talk about on my show all the time, which is the Asch conformity experiment. Is an experiment that you can do where one person is actually the person that the test is being done on, and everyone else in the room is asked questions and is giving the wrong answer. And you don't know this, but the rest of them are all paid actors. And what you find is that people are reluctant to come forward with the correct answer if the rest of the room is giving the wrong one. And the more people you put in the room, the more reluctant they are. Now, if you put even just one person in the room who's also giving the correct answer, then that's possible that that person will come forward and go and be more likely to tell the truth. And that's what I feel my role is. For the rest of these guys, it's let me, I'm sure, for example, if the left lined up on the other side of this, all of a sudden, all of these people would just fall right along because that's their grift. And you know what my grift is? Telling the goddamn truth. Period.
Okay.
Next.
Mic drop.
This is my mic dropping.
Guys, if I may, because I'm gonna have to go in a bit. If I just quickly on the media side, it's insanity. Like to me, I'm sorry. I cannot imagine that in my country there would be such a lie, like so easily to disprove and stuff like that, and so common, to a point where it's clearly not a mistake. It's even past negligence at this point. It's like a downright lie. And I just can't imagine that. And I mentioned it already a few times. We have actually, unlike UANs, we have regulatory bodies that regulate media when they lie, when they, for example, use unethical methods and stuff like that, that they slap them over the fingers and say, no, you cannot do that. And I know that's a kind of a issue in the United States because you pride yourself on the unrestricted freedom of speech, when it comes to this, and especially in the press. But I would like to, it is undeniable that Kyle Rittenhouse case demonstrates the downsides of unrestricted freedom of speech. If it's worth it or not worth it, hey, that's up to you. But these are definitely downsides. That's undeniable. And if I may, just because, as I said, I'm gonna go in a bit. We have here some person in the chat. He wrote this, that we don't have militias in Europe, and that because America is backwards. Mate, let me tell you, how it would look in Europe if what was happening in Kenosha would be happening here. And that is that cities were, the city was burning. The police stood back. Either they didn't have enough manpower or they were ordered for political reasons to stand back. Hey, you have still a city on fire. We would organize into groups. We would be far more active than what was happening in Kenosha with the armed citizens, where they were just standing in around businesses and being as a deterrent. No, we would actively go out there, be looking for the arsonists, tell them to stop. If they would not stop, we would go in and try to restrain them. If they would fight, we would overcome that. If they would have buddies, then it's time for broken bones and spilled blood. But that's their choice, not ours, because we don't want our city burned to the ground, and we perceive the city burning as the initial act of aggression. So that is my. And by the way, if you doubt this, ask yourself a question. I was asking in one of my videos, if you would have a tribal society, like for example on Papua New Guinea, do you think the people would just stand back as you are burning their huts? Like seriously?
Good point.
Even an anarcho-communist society would not tolerate people showing up and destroying their city. That's just ridiculous. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, guys. I'm gonna go because it's 10 p.m. I don't like here.
How about a quick plug for your own channel?
Yeah. So, guys, if you are interested in this line of thinking and in the content that I produce, you can find it on YouTube or on Twitter under the name Logical Checkmate. For those of you who do not know, I am from Czech Republic and I'm very much interested in the Kyle Rittenhouse saga for many, many reasons. Yeah. So yeah, if you want, you can search me up and I'll be glad to see some new subscribers, new faces, and let's discuss this. By the way, if we have some anti-Kyles, people who think, Kyle Rittenhouse is guilty or whatever, I would like to discuss with you on camera if anyone's interested. But for some reason, there are no takers for over a year. I wonder why.
Now, real quickly before you leave, can you tell them all what to do to the like button?
Yeah, smack that bitch.
Give it a good smack, a very hard smack.
Okay then, boys. Have
all
a good
right.
one. And
take care. Thanks for joining.
Nice to meet you, buddy.
Take care, Paul.
Okay, so I would like to talk a bit about what I have experienced in terms of how the media has approached this case. My main concern was not so much the reporters, but the little guest lawyer, attorney, analysts. Oh my God, where do they get this? I cannot imagine why a defense attorney being asked for their impressions on the Kyle Rittenhouse case would side with the prosecution and basically say, well, this kid's guilty. You're a defense attorney, right? Isn't it your professional career to craft defensive strategies and expose the evidence for your clients? So Who would want to hire somebody like that? So they always have these shows, they have these panels, they bring in these lawyers. A lot of them are civil rights lawyers. In fact, almost all of them are, even though this is a murder case. A murder case involving self-defense and gun laws, and they bring in time after time attorneys who specialize in civil defense litigation. And I've said it before, if you're a lawyer and you're not a criminal lawyer and you don't work on self-defense cases, you're not an expert. Your legal background is worthless. And in fact, I would take a CCW holder, their opinions on a case like this over yours. But they bring them in.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I'll just say they bring them in and they know they're going to get a very anti-Kyle take on the issue, and that's why they do it. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to add to what you said and then make sure that we get Kevin talking again because he hasn't spoken for a bit, was that they also don't realize the sheer irresponsibility of shaping the perceptions of this case and how it is being handled in a negative way. Like that Kevin Glowicki guy called me out because he felt that I irresponsibly shared that video of that guy, Cortez Rice, saying things about taking pictures of jurors. And, and he's like, you're switching a narrative that's going to lead to people being angry. And I was like, okay, well, this guy doing that is what's going to get people to freak out, and I
didn't he interviewed that guy on his
he did
YouTube?
Yeah, he did. And it went just as bad as you can probably imagine.
Sure.
But my point is just that, it's sheer irresponsibility. Who's going to because at the same time, Kevin Glowicki is talking crap about the judge. So if we keep emphasizing that the judge is this horrible, evil, racist person, if anything's going to incite riots, well, the right hasn't really been doing a whole lot of rioting. The left will be like, racist judge isn't giving us, and then they'll be out burning stuff. And that's not going to be my fault. That's going to be theirs. Anyway, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, and so Glucky, he is he's one of those multiple violent felon types who I actually did a background check on the guy, and he's a monster, that guy, and he uses the N-word. He got arrested for drunk driving and called the police officers the N-word. So, I mean, this is a guy who claims to be a Black Lives Matter protest or activist. So I don't usually take much of what he says more than a grain of salt. But it goes back to integrity of the system. I mean, these people, they won't accept the verdict unless it's what they want, right? So it's going to be a racist judge, right? Or it's going to be a racist jury. They can't stand to admit, well, the evidence was presented, it was fair. Kyle was acquitted, right? They're not promoting faith in the system, right? And this is not a perfect system, but it's the best in the world, right? I mean, we can all agree on that. I mean, some countries, they don't have it as good as we do, and this is going to be the definition of how the system can work. When you're the state, you have unlimited resources. You have unlimited investigators, police. You have unlimited funds for experts. When you're the defendant, you have very limited resources. In this case, David and Goliath mentality was kind of offset because millions of patriots donated to Kyle's defense fund. But imagine if he didn't have those resources. Maybe he couldn't win this case. I mean, his lawyers are sharp, but I will say, it's like with gambling. I'd rather be lucky than good any day. Well, in this case, the facts are all on Kyle's side. All of the evidence points to a Kyle acquittal. So really, you could put any attorney up there and you should be able to get good results. But these are sharp attorneys. So when you have the facts on your side, you have sharp attorneys, it increases your likelihood of success. But you're going to have the Kevin Glowicki types and the BLMs that are going to say, well, it's because of the racist judge or it's because of X, Y, and Z. Well, no, the system worked how it's supposed to work, right? I think OJ did it, but he was acquitted. We have to just accept that. And you know what? Karma got to him, and he ended up doing some prison time, anyways. Right? It's just, you know, these people that won't accept anything except what they want. They drive me nuts. You know.
Well, and it kind of the whole thing about that, like it's funny you bring up OJ because that's a good example, but it's also like I think that they need to recognize that this is not this is not a race issue; it's a class issue. Michael Jackson got off. What's another good example? Bill Cosby. You know, a dude who's guilty as a cat in a goldfish bowl. You know, and I don't think that this is in any way like indicative of like that. I think that now a legitimate point that was made by the YouTuber Just Some Guy was that if the left was smart, they would be using this opportunity to expose to the people on the right that we need criminal justice reform because Binger and the mishandling of the prosecution of this case is a great way to convince people, man, maybe we need to look at this again, because it makes you wonder how many other people have been screwed like this who don't have the benefit of, that they got lucky and got $2 million in fundraising, and it makes you wonder, like, God, where would Kyle be if he had to stick with some poor public defender, in that town, and it's like, it would have been a very different scenario. Bernusky.
Well, I want to comment on just a couple things you guys said. One of them being that I know you said it earlier, Kevin, and I don't necessarily disagree with all of it, but I think that when you say that they won't accept the outcome regardless of what the outcome is, I can kind of understand that because I think that we've seen all the evidence ourselves, and if the jury were to find Kyle guilty, I wouldn't accept the outcome because I've seen the evidence. I've seen the video. So I don't necessarily agree with that point. Like, I don't have a problem with them disagreeing with the outcome. What I do take a major issue with is the media coverage of this case, and I'm going to go into a bit of a rant here. From everything we've seen, like from the very start, obviously there's two different types of media. There's YouTube media. There's obviously the corporate media that you see now. And the corporate media, like I think with the YouTube media, such as guys that V Radio mentioned earlier, Serv, Savash, those types of guys, I think they're true believers. I think they actually believe the things that they said. And that's why now that the evidence has come out more emphatically, they've kind of changed their tune. With the corporate media, people such as CNN, MSNBC, they're really pushing three different talking points right now. One of them is just straight up lying about the case or lying by omission. I don't know if you guys saw this the other day. Joe Scarborough was talking about the case. He said that Kyle Rittenhouse fired like 60 shots that night. Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
Not kidding. He said on his show that he fired 60 shots. He had Claire McCaskill on if you want to view the video on YouTube, and she didn't know anything about the case either. So that's just some insanity that the media is doing now. I mean, obviously the cross state lines with an AR-15. The View said that the other day, and I know they're not news, but they do have millions of listeners, like housewives and that sort of stuff every day. They keep on repeating these lies about the case, and that is to confuse the issue, obviously. Another tactic.
60 rounds, like a Rambo 80s movie.
Yeah. That's what Scarborough said. He said Kyle shot like 60 rounds that night or something like that. It was insane. I couldn't believe it. And all the comments, speaking of taking away the dislike button, all the comments, that video was disliked to all hell, just because people were like, "Are you effing kidding me?" But that being said, the second thing they're doing is they're straight up going to smear the judge. They're going after the judge hard. It's basically like they don't even argue the point anymore. They just say straight up, yes, the judge is clearly biased. Yes, the judge is biased. Yes, the judge is a joke. Like, they've skipped past any evidence of that. They're just saying, yep, judge is biased. Judge is uncanny. The guest on, I think it may have been Don Lemon show on CNN, Bakari Sellers, actually said that the judge has been outrageous and that he's basically applying for a job at Fox News after this. So they've been completely going after the judge 100%. And the third talking point they're really taking is chalking this up to vigilantism. Like, you saw Don Lemon the other night make the point, what would America look like if people just found that they needed to protect their streets, to protect their town, protect their country. Personally, I think that's a great thing. But it's been mentioned on CNN. it's MSNBC's main talking point is that this is about vigilantism. They put an article out about it. Chris Hayes has put out that this is a story of vigilantism and whether we're going to allow vigilantism in the United States. Joy Reid, who's a psycho, obviously said that as well and added her little racial bias into it. So those are really the biggest talking points that they're using in order to try and just taint this case in a negative light because they know what the outcome is going to be. And really, I think their goals for this are, one, they're news networks. They want more riots. They want more to report on. They're trying to stoke these riots by making people angry about the verdict, how that's going to be not guilty. And secondly, I think a lot of them, as we've all kind of pointed out, this is now a political trial. It is not just about pride. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think it's also because someone stated before, I don't remember who, that they want to punish Kyle because of his ideology. And for the media, them painting the trial this way, them painting Kyle as a white supremacist, active shooter and all that stuff, that is to give him extrajudicial punishment. Because they know that the justice system is going to find him innocent, so they want to try and wreck his life any way they can without the rule of law being on their side. So that's kind of my view on this whole thing. The Joe Scarborough thing the other night, I couldn't help but laugh when he said it, but they've just been so outrageous about this whole thing. And I noticed earlier, there are going to be some videos out later today about all the media lies about this case. I couldn't even put a count on it. Like, I can't imagine how many times they've lied about this case. And we all know what the lies are because we hear them all the time and we debunk them all the time, but people still believe them.
And some of them, she's a really good looking girl from the Young Turks. I forget her name, but she actually...
Anna?
Gosh.
No.
She just said
Emma Vigland?
She said something about, look, I said this before and I was wrong.
Oh, yeah, that was
Anna
Kasparian.
That was Anna Kasparian.
Yeah, so I mean, you gotta give credit where it's due. But back to accepting the verdict, and I think that we agree, but the definition of accepting the verdict, if Kyle is acquitted, the left will probably ask for, I don't know, the Justice Department then to charge him, or they'll look for an end around, right? Whereas if Kyle is convicted, those of us sitting here will want to go through the process that's designed. Let's start the appeal. How do we get in front of the appellate court? So we're not going to be advocating for somebody to bust this kid out of jail and let's go sneak him to Mexico. So yeah, I want to.
Not yet.
There is no verdict in my mind other than not guilty. That is correct. Period. So I won't accept it, but I'll live with it because I have to. Because we don't have anarchy in this country. We have to abide by what the results are, even if we don't like them. So that's what I meant by accept the verdict. Whereas the left, like I said, they'll start a change.org petition. Dear Biden, put Kyle in jail. The judge was racist. He belonged. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So,
well, we got another. Go ahead, finish.
Oh, I was just going to say, Ripley joined in, and he kind of reminded me of something I wanted to say. The one advantage, or I should say, the one distinction between the anti-Kyle and the pro-Kyle camp is the pro-Kyle camp is comprising of a lot of people who spend a lot of time digging through research, posting, trying to understand what happened. On the other side, they don't do anything of the sort. It's all based on what they see on Twitter, what they heard from the local talking heads. And is the contrast as stark to me as it is to you guys? Is that kind of right? Because Ripley reminds me, he's a guy who's just poured his heart into this case. He's really dived deep, but there's a whole bunch of us that have done this. I don't see anybody on the anti-Kyle side doing anything like this.
No, not with any. No, definitely not. Well, I guess like Kevin Glowicki seems to think he is, but he's the only one I've talked to on the left who thinks he's kind of doing any investigative journalism. But the rest of them are just repeating what people want to hear. And, and he's repeating what he wants to believe is more or less what I gathered out of it. Like I was watching one of his streams and he literally just melted down and started crying. And I believe it's legit. I honestly believe that he was in fact traumatized because he saw Gage Grosskreutz get shot and like that affected him, like seeing the blood and all that. Not everybody can handle that. But as a consequence of that now, because this is something I said earlier, is that I think that the left's problem here, as far as the far left, is that they got their asses kicked. Somebody finally stood up and prevented them from burning a city. And as a consequence, they're taking it personally because they lost. And as a result, this is personal for them for that reason. And that's where the Antifa types and the militant BLM types are on this situation. So I do want to, there's another question here. Jezebels says, in all seriousness, what can be done legally towards the media being held accountable for their lies? Now, I want to weigh in on this real quick. If I had any regrets about Lynn Wood not being involved in this case anymore, if Lynn Wood was still on this case, Kyle Rittenhouse would own the Young Turks. You can sue these people for defamation. Lynn Wood proved that. Now, Lynn has kind of gone a little eccentric. I'm going to be polite because he was very nice to me, and I don't, he was, and a lot of my viewers are still into him. But some defamation lawyer should already be making their cases right now. You can sue these people. I want to give a brief history lesson on how we got here. There was the end of the fairness doctrine, which was, I can't remember who deregulated that, like which administration, but I know it wasn't that long ago. Was it Reagan? Was it Clinton? I can't remember. Another deregulation that happened was Clinton was the one that deregulated how much of the media can be owned by one person. There used to be rules in place to prevent one person from owning too much of the media, and Bill Clinton was presiding over that being deregulated. And then finally, there was a lawsuit where Fox News was sued, and the end consequence of it was that they were told that you are not actually obligated to tell the truth in the news. So the only recourse at that point is the following. One, if you don't like what the media is doing, support independent media. It doesn't have to be anybody on this call. I even go out of my way to get exposure to people that I don't agree with, because at the end of the day, I'd still rather deal with, a leftist who perhaps doesn't agree with me about riots, or a conservative, who doesn't agree with me about a lot of other things. I'd rather that if there are conservatives out there looking for alternative media, that they go to somebody like that than to be listening to Fox News. And the same thing is, I don't want anybody listening to MSNBC. It's a trash network. It's garbage, and so if you don't like what's going on in the media, you need to support the alternative, because as you can see, the algorithm doesn't like us. There is an attempt slowly for them starting to try to figure out how to minimize the voices of people like us. And as a consequence, for example, to do the stuff that I do, I am not going to get monetized. I was monetized for like 4 days because there's no way they're going to monetize me. And, so that's the first step. The second step is help ruin the reputation of the mainstream media. Come forward yourself, because unfortunately what it comes down to is their motive for doing all this is what makes them money. And if they stop making money because of their lies, and if the public perception of mainstream media is destroyed, then they don't have any choice but to change their tune. There was a time in this country when the media competed over, I'm telling the truth, I'm credible, I'm more credible than anyone else, and I have the most, accurate news, and I correct myself if I was wrong. That used to be what journalism was. We will compete at being the best truth seekers there are. That does not exist in this country anymore. The news is about as real as the WWE is real wrestling. Next.
What?
Kevin, anything you'd like to add on that?
Somebody mentioned vigilantism, and I just typed it in the dictionary, Oxford. A member of a self-appointed group of citizens who will undertake law enforcement in their community without legal authority, typically because the legal agencies are thought to be inadequate. That term vigilante is thrown around a little too loosely. Like Kyle wasn't out there trying to arrest people. He wasn't out there trying to enforce the law. He was out there to try to protect life and property. I've been called a vigilante. I didn't want anybody to try to go arrest these people or approach them and confront them. I was sitting at the entrance to my neighborhood with my gun, talking with my neighbors. We weren't enforcing the law. If we would have saw somebody smoking a joint, we wouldn't have walked up to him and said, "Hey, put your hands behind your back." To defend oneself or defend one's family or neighborhood or home or business, there's nothing that aligns with the word vigilantism. So I hate how it's thrown around so wildly by the media. There's nothing vigilantism about a city burning and people saying we're not going to let it burn. It's like, that's just not what it is, and especially when the police are outnumbered and the government cannot provide for our safety. So I think that's just something to get on the record. Another thing we need to investigate, which I'm going to look, it's going to be tough, but Gage, remember Gage kept posting a screenshot of his concealed carry license?
Yeah.
So that one didn't expire until, help me, 2023 or something?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the thing.
I can't remember it, but
yet it's been revealed during the trial that it's not valid.
But that's what we have to look at, because he said Binger says it was expired, correct? And he said yes. Then he said, "Did you renew it?" And he said no. So expired. So only one of these two options can be true. Either he photoshopped or somehow manipulated that photo of his ID, or he lied, because that didn't expire until 2023. So that was either a false representation of his CCW license, or he got into some trouble that none of us know about, where they said, because what happens in Illinois is if you're charged with a felony or domestic violence, something that would preclude you in the state from carrying a gun, they basically send you a letter saying, here's a self-addressed stamped envelope. Send us that license back. We'll let you know later if you get it back, right? So we got to find out if he photoshopped that, which is a crime, right? That's a crime. Or we need to find out if Binger was being disingenuous by saying, oh, it expired. Because if he got in some kind of trouble out of state or somewhere where we can't pin him to it, and he lied under oath, that's something big, because those two can't be true. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but
was he, now this is something that I've seen out there, but I haven't actually confirmed this. Was he charged with some sort of burglary or something like that? Because if that's the case, then he may have lost it for that without it necessarily expiring.
But it was expunged, unfortunately.
Yeah,
his burglary was expunged.
Oh, okay.
It's the only reason
I don't think it was.
So it's tough. So the only way I was able to get the criminal complaint of him, it is a fact that he was charged with felony burglary. We know that is what we know for sure. And the only reason I was able to get that criminal complaint is because he had co-defendants who were also charged, who their court records were not expunged. So, they were all charged as party to a crime, right? So I have his criminal complaint. We know he was charged with felony burglary. It's ambiguous to where, was he convicted and then it later expunged? Was it a plea deal? Was it convicted and still remains of record and unreversed? We don't know. And the prosecutor certainly doesn't care, because it just hurts their case. But what do you think, Johnny?
My understanding of it was a plea deal. But then again, I may have it wrong. I think you were much closer to the action, would know more than I would. So it looks like it is ambiguous. I have no idea about that felony robbery. By the way, I did cover that in depth on my channel, and it's hilarious.
I enjoyed watching that.
Oh, the criminal complaint, it is so funny because he's lying to the police and they're trying to drag stuff out of him. It's great fun.
And didn't they have him arrange like a call to one of his co-defendants?
Yeah. He called one of his co-defendants up to try to get the other guy to incriminate, but the co-defendant incriminated him during the call, and Gage kept hanging up because he kept hanging.
Well, the guy was like, "Hey, but Gage, what are you talking about? You were the one whose idea it was." And Gage is like, "Click! Oh shit! Lost the call." Yeah, I mean, he's call back. No one's ever accused Gage of being smart.
No, I mean, seriously, he comes off as real dummy in that entire episode.
Streamers, make sure that you're monitoring your own chat so that we can also take questions from.
I want to follow up on your talk about vigilantism. That is a word that has really bothered me for the same reasons. People don't understand what that means. And, Even the title of that one article by Paige Williams, Kyle Rittenhouse, American Vigilante.
By the way, she
No.
never called me, so she
Oh,
didn't even interview me.
she is a total snake, and not enough ire has been directed at her for what has happened here. But she wrote an extraordinarily biased article, and of course, when the title is American Vigilante, you get the impression that it's not going to be real fair to Kyle. So, a vigilante, as you're right, is a person who's taking over the functions of a government body. Acting as private security, even if you are not necessarily legally allowed to or whatever, that's not vigilantism. It's just a person going out in the streets trying to prevent bad things from happening. If he starts arresting people, okay, maybe. Because you could apply a citizen's arrest. That doesn't make you a vigilante either. So the term has no real legal meaning, but it certainly does not apply to Kyle Rittenhouse.
Well, I think the reason that they're using it is basically just as a way to dishonestly frame it so that they can, I mean, let's be honest, it's the media who's doing this. The media wants to protect the protesters and rioters who they sided with for the whole summer. So them calling the people who are standing up to them vigilantes is a way to frame it that, oh no, leave the protesters and rioters alone. Like that's the way that I view it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So did you have any questions from your audience, Johnny?
No, I don't really read too well.
Oh,
My
you haven't been
eyesight's not
monitoring
just
it?
good,
Oh, that's no problem. Well, I will say questions that I still have that have yet to be answered is are we ever going to find out who fired those other shots from a rifle? And are they ever going to prosecute whoever fired at Ryan Balch that he talked about? They brought it up in the court, and then the judge said, this is later, right? Meaning after Kyle was out of the situation. They went, yeah. He's like, okay, we're not talking about that. It wasn't like the judge thought it wasn't important in so much as just it's irrelevant to Kyle's case. But Balch, testified on the stand that somebody in a white car shot at him, and he had to duck behind another car to take cover. And I'm like, wow, I'd kind of like to know what the hell that was about. Has anybody gotten any more information on these kind of questions?
Well, so the courthouse itself and the Kenosha County Administrative Building across the street had many tens of thousands of dollars in damage from bullet holes. There was bullet holes all over all the government buildings. The Bearcat and the MRAP, the Armored Personnel Carriers, I don't know if you'd call them dings or what, because obviously they didn't penetrate, but there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shots that night. So, and the problem is here in Wisconsin, the crime lab does not accept spent casings for purposes of DNA or fingerprints, because those shells get too hot that they disintegrate all DNA. They disintegrate the oils from fingerprints. So it's tough. It's an uphill investigative battle to try to figure out who shot where, when, and why. But what I do know is that if this guy, Kevin Mathewson, on the 4th of July or New Year's Eve, brought a pistol outside and shot it at midnight, I'd be charged with second-degree reckless endangerment. Zeminski shoots a gun up in the air in the middle of a riot and he gets disorderly conduct. Is that white privilege? I mean, what's the deal there? Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, the ATF, it seems like they're making more arrests than local police. They keep arresting people here and there for arson and other things. But I mean, it's now been almost 15 months, and there really have not been any serious. I'm unaware of any arson to building charges being brought forward, and it's been 15 months. So there's a chance we may never find out who was responsible for some of these, thanks to the new religion of COVID, where it's normal for everybody to run around with a mask on their face, for crying out loud. That's a big culprit to a lot of this crap too, to be honest with you. It used to be alarming when you saw somebody walking into a gas station covering their face. Now it's just the norm.
Well, I would also piggyback onto the arson thing. Zeminski is facing arson charges, and the prosecutor is Binger, and the judge is Schroeder. And the thing about it is, it's funny, is the prosecutor was trying to diminish the evils of arson during Kyle's trial, the same guy who's going to be bringing charges against Joshua Zeminski.
Well, I mean, you only saw like 7 or 8 fires, right? It's not like you saw 10 fires, right, Kyle? Kyle, you're running towards the fire with a fire extinguisher. I mean, what's with the
What's
sense
your
of
hurry?
urgency? It was a fire. I mean, those things. I mean, it's. I don't care if you're on the left or the right. You have to look at that line of questioning and think, this guy is an idiot. You know, I mean, whether
Hopefully the jury thinks that.
yeah, and they do. You know, I look at the jury, and when they look at Binger, they look at him as a villain. And you know, Kyle was crying. You know, he's got PTSD. You know, we us fellas, you know, we're all probably gun owners here. I'm guessing. If somebody breaks into my house and they're anywhere near my kids or my family, I'm going to make spaghetti out of their head on the wall, right? And I like to talk a big game, but you know what? I'm going to be disturbed about that, right? I'm going to have PTSD. I'm going to feel terrible that I had to take a human life. My kids are going to be traumatized that they had to see somebody get their head blown off in my house. I'm going to vomit, maybe. You know, I'm going to, a year later, be upset to talk about it. But the left is acting like they'd rather him just be brazen and not show emotion. You know, so when the jury saw him crying, they took it authentically, in my opinion. And what else do you expect? You know, they're making fun of him, you know, minutes after, you know, when he's at the Eniac Police Department and he's, you know, crying and vomiting into the bait. What did you expect him to do? He's a human being, for crying out loud, and he just had to kill 2 people. You know, as much as we like to talk, you know, big manly things, we'd all be affected by that. You know, police officers who have to take a life, or you know, in the military having to take a life, even though it's justified, it's still tough. You know, it's tough on your psyche, on your mind. So
Well,
I mean, I think
throughout the
Kyle
trial, they were suggesting he was some sociopathic psychopath not showing any remorse.
Sure.
You know, so that's their narrative.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It didn't matter what he did. They were going to have one way or the other to try and smear him over that. Whether it was the fake tears, like LeBron said, and let's be honest, LeBron's just jealous that Kyle's a better shooter than he is. But
Yeah.
whether it's the fake, you know, the fake tears, or oh look, he shows no remorse, like they were always going to smear him, no matter what his reaction was. So
Well,
that sort
the
of
other
thing.
And they were going to call it fake no matter what. That was
Yeah.
going to be the ultimate. Look, that's not fake. That's a panic attack. I've said it before. I've seen my students do this. I've had to call, you know, emergency medical for students in the past because they get an exam and they just come uncorked. I've seen it. That was real. And it followed the same pattern I've seen before. And the idea of people going out there and making fun of him, this is coming from the left. I thought that the left was supposed to be like in tune with the human emotion, understanding of sociology and psychology, all those great things they always portray themselves on. Now they got an 18-year-old kid having a panic attack, and what do? They make fun of him, and they talk about how fake it
here's
is.
the thing. It didn't matter if he cried. They're going to attack him for pretending. If he didn't cry, they'd attack him for not being sensitive. You can't win with
It's because of the witch hunt. It's a witch hunt. It's
Right,
the same religious persecution mentality, and I've been comparing it to that for a long time. And I actually studied religious persecution at one point in my life, and that's exactly what it is. There is no correct answer. You know, we're going to test the witch. This is how we're going to test her. We're going to tie her hands and her legs behind her back and throw her in the water. If she sinks and drowns, at least her soul is with God. If she floats, then she's obviously in league with Lucifer, and we need to burn her to death. That's the kind of mentality that they have. Now, Johnny, I want to ask you a quick technical question because I guess you're hosting it. Do you see that I added a thing that you can share screen? It's like a picture of Twitter.
Let's see here. Where would it be?
In their lower left-hand corner.
Oh, okay. Yeah, add to stream. Want me to hit
do
it?
that, and then that'll allow me to share this video. So I wanted to ask you about this because this was tweeted a long time ago, and I just stumbled across it again because this was actually around the night in question. But this is Black Lives Matter protesters or Antifa protesters or both, and you're going to find somebody brandishing specifically an AR-15 and lining up like he's going to shoot cops if they come out of those Bearcat. and then eventually turning around and firing at it. So I'm going to go ahead and play this, and I want to see what you guys all think. Can you all see it?
Yep,
Mhm.
I can see it. I can see it.
Oh, they're gonna shoot a gas out the top. Kick that shit back.
Look at him. What's he doing?
Gas! You're fucking coward!
Man, would I love to have a rubber bullet gun or a tear gas container.
There's another guy with a rifle right there.
Gas! Gas! Gas!
They're shouting gas. Where is the gas?
It hasn't
They're
happened
about to.
yet.
They're getting out!
They're going to deploy. They're getting out. Like, that dude literally just lined up in front of the door of that Bearcat. Like, what did he think he was going to do? Take pot shots at the cops coming out of the Bearcat?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be the first to say I shouldn't be trusted with a rubber bullet gun or tear gas because I'd hit every one of those idiots with a rubber bullet.
Oh wait, that's other acts evidence, Kevin. We've got you now.
Now watch this dude with the
Binger, call
AR
Binger.
with the long hair, because he's eventually going to take a shot at this Bearcat.
They all have gas masks on. Get ready. Gas masks on.
F around and find out, right?
Mhm.
Well, and the cops are just trying to get out of here. They're blocking the Bearcat. Now he's going to turn, and he levels his gun and starts firing. You'll see it in a moment.
There he is.
So that guy was shooting at the Bearcat?
Yeah.
That's an insanely stupid thing to do. I mean, those things I think are meant to deflect bullets, so he could have easily hit someone else doing that
And what
on a ricochet.
What T. Claire said during trial, which made me really disgusted, is he said something like, "Oh, and you saw some people shooting at the Bearcat and throwing concrete. Oh, well, they're protected inside there, so it doesn't really matter." What? Shooting at a police officer? I don't care if they have 8 inches of bulletproof glass in between them and the shooter. You don't shoot at a cop no matter what, and it's always dangerous to fire a gun. Period.
Well, and okay, so peaceful protest, guys. Nobody should have shown up with a gun to that peaceful protest.
Yeah, it's weird. I didn't see that on CNN while it was happening.
Well, no, definitely not. And Andy No tweeted it, and he's also kind of a grifter in his own way, but it doesn't change the fact that that was actually taken, by the way, with Drew Hernandez's secret camera. He would dress up as Antifa, disguise himself, and that's why he got that footage. This is what they do when the cameras are not rolling. If there was somebody filming, there was somebody taking pictures. But the problem with the picture thing is Antifa has their own media, who take pictures of stuff selectively. So, for example,
Unicorn Riot.
Right. When the gunfight broke out in Portland, when one guy with a handgun is literally having a gunfight with 4 members of Antifa with guns, there's all this media walking around, yet the only person who even talked about the fact that he was being fired on by members of Antifa with pistols was the person who happened to be streaming it at that moment, who was live, so he couldn't select it. But you watch these, literally you're watching Antifa media duck and dodge behind cars to get shots of the shooter, who's a conservative with a pistol, and avoid bringing any attention to the fact that Antifa had guns. And so this is the rest of why I wanted to play this, was that, well, he had a rifle. What was he got that gun for? Why is he coming to a protest? Why would anybody arm themselves and go to a protest? I mean, this isn't even talking about the guy I call Ice Cube, who racked his pistol like he thought he was a threat to somebody when they were facing off over the dumpster fire. That's a different guy. They were saying, well, they had pistols. Okay, well, here you got it. 2 dudes with an AR-15 who were facing off with the cops. And I go back to that part where he lines up in front of the door. Like, what did he think he was going to do? Because they're like, okay, they're coming out. Let me see if I can go back to just that part.
Yeah, because he stood in front of the door with his rifle.
Oh, yeah, okay, this is a little further. But, you watch him walk up, he's all, low ready stance, like he's waiting for them to pop out of that door. What do you think you're going to do? And again, don't forget, these are peaceful protesters, and, no, outward help should have ever shown up to challenge them. They put themselves in that situation. It's their fault, and they didn't even belong there. Okay, so does this guy belong there? Does that person live in Kenosha? May or may not.
Why is the ATF not putting out a video? Hey, do you know this douchebag? If so, call 1-800 ATF.
I don't
say
know.
Antifa? I meant ATF. I mean, this guy, somebody out there knows who this guy is. And when you put a reward out there, this guy's friends will take a few bucks over their loyalty to this D-bag no matter what. So why aren't we seeing this guy's image plastered all over?
I'm honestly stunned that Jump Kick guy hasn't come forward.
Yeah.
Like, I imagine the media would love to talk to that guy.
I'm confident he must be wanted.
Oh, absolutely. He must be a serious criminal if he's not coming out in the open.
You got to incentivize these guys. You got to put a little reward out, $5,000 or something.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
By the way, go ahead. Who complains about the militarization of the police the most?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Gee, I wonder why we have these Bearcats.
Well, yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about that earlier.
The city of Kenosha just bought it for next year is buying a brand new, like, high-tech one.
Well, and the fact that they have this Bearcat is the reason this ended the way that it did, which is nobody else got hurt, including the frickin' morons that were trying to engage with cops. And they call it a tank. And I'm like, a tank has weapons on it, you frickin' moron. The only purpose of this Bearcat is to prevent people from getting hurt on the inside. It actually lets them navigate around riots without having to kill anyone. You can see all kinds of videos over the course of the riots of burning police cars, which in many cases initially had cops in them who have then gotten out and escaped. So that's why they have Bearcats, so that they don't have to kill more people. As ridiculous as that sounds, it's not a tank. Nobody's been killed by a Bearcat. It doesn't make the police more deadly. It makes them more able to navigate dangerous situations without having to engage.
And you guys want to hear something funny too? So the only I should say one out of the 2 African-American aldermen for the city of Kenosha, his name is Anthony Kennedy, far on the left, introduced a resolution. You'd think I'm making this up. He introduced legislation for the city council to ban tear gas and rubber bullets, to ban them.
I heard about that.
Okay. So you're either saying you want the police to have no way to deter these people, or you're saying you want them to use lethal force, I guess. Because if I was on the council still, I would have put a budget amendment to quadruple the funding for rubber bullets and tear gas, because that stuff is awesome. It hurts these idiots, but it doesn't kill them. It makes them disperse. I mean, it's such a good tool so that you don't have to kill people and get lawsuits and get more riots. I mean, the fact that this idiot wanted to ban these things, it's like,
well, that's the interesting thing about, them, basically the idea of like violent policing and police shootings and that sort of thing, is that you've effectively taken away the ability of police officers to take in unwilling suspects violently, except for the use of like their firearm. Like, you can't chokehold a suspect. You can't hit a suspect with a baton, like, ever since the whole Rodney King thing. You can't, like punch a suspect or anything like that. The only way you really have to detain suspects is to tase them, which doesn't work like 40% of the time, or point your gun at them and hope that they, do what you tell them to. Otherwise, you could have a deadly situation. So they keep. Go ahead.
Yeah, they want to ban riot shields. They want to ban riot gear.
Yeah.
Nobody's getting killed with riot shields, guys. And like one of them literally just kind of let it slip. We need them to be more vulnerable. Like,
yes, there it is.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. I mean, they want to riot, they want to pillage, and they don't want anybody to stop them. And that's the reason why the AR-15 is such an evil symbol in their minds, because it's the one thing that levels the playing field between a small little group trying to protect property and a mob.
Did you guys see this evidence that Binger's a white supremacist?
Yeah.
I love stuff like that. In one of my videos about, I think it might have been Kyle Rittenhouse. Yes, I mentioned the white supremacist thing, except I have LeBron James and Steph Curry and all them holding up this sign right here. Obviously for a different reason.
Well, for sure. Well, no, it's so stupid. And the thing is that 4chan did a prank. They literally created fake accounts specifically to go and pretend to be woke people and publish false information to say that the OK symbol is a white power symbol. Like, and even when the hoax was revealed, they just doubled down, because if they can get a picture of anybody doing the OK symbol, they can call them a white supremacist. Go ahead.
When I was a kid, I'm 36. When I was a kid, you put the little symbol, the hole, down at your side, and you'd say to your buddy, "Hey, what's this?" And if they looked, you got to punch them in the shoulder. That was the game we played, and that's where that came up. And once I was told that it's a symbol of white supremacy, it took me by surprise, because that was just a game we played. Or, okay, you good to go? Yeah, we're okay. If it was up to them, they'd make every hand gesture white supremacy. You'd be afraid to like talk with your hands. It's stupid.
The reason that it's not necessarily just that they fell for it. The reason that they kept doing it is because afterwards, people on the right started doing the OK sign to make fun of them for it.
Right.
So now they had this narrative where that's the white supremacist hand symbol. It's obviously not. It's being made fun of. People on the right make fun of them by using that symbol. And so they go, see, look, white supremacists doing it. Even it's like a Ben Shapiro type of that sort of thing. It's just an excuse for them to smear people.
Sure.
They took the bait. They fell for it. People on the right made fun of them for it. They said, look, great. They're proving our points. Now we can continue to go that route.
So we were talking about media bias earlier. And here's CBS Morning saying he murdered two men at a Black Lives Matter protest. I did want to make one more point about the media thing that is important, that people need to understand that deregulating the media was a bipartisan effort. It's not something you can point at the donkeys and say they did it, and you can't point at the elephants and say that they did it. It's both sides had a vested interest in this.
And back to that too, though.
Go ahead.
It's hard. We were talking about the media. It's very tough to successfully sue a major news media organization for defamation. It is very difficult to win. Mm-hmm. They have so many exemptions and immune. Oh, go back. That's that. I watch her testify all the time.
Oh my goodness, I'm in love with her.
She's pretty. She's so pretty, but that voice is like.
It didn't bother me as much, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
But yeah.
You're definitely right about that. It is very hard to sue the media. But the way that I see it, they have a lot of protections. You're right. For instance, they can lie by omission all they want. Like all the lies by omission in the Rittenhouse case, Kyle doesn't stand a chance of getting any kind of restitution for that. The areas where he can get restitution are the lies about him bringing the rifle across state lines, or about his mother dropping him off at that riot, people saying she needs to be charged. But there's two different standards. If you're a public figure, then there needs to be like malicious intent. If you're not a public figure, then it just needs to be, I can't remember the exact phrasage, but it just has to be basically not doing your due diligence at all and damaging this person's life.
And the problem is the courts have ruled that you can be a public figure accidentally. In other words, Kyle is now a public figure, even though he didn't check a box saying, I want to be a public figure.
Yes, so but the standard for that is actually surprisingly high, and it might be at the point where Kyle has crossed it, because basically the standard is you have to be considered a household name. Now, at this point, unfortunately for Kyle, he probably is in this instance. But back when this thing first happened, that might not be the case. So I'm not entirely sure how this will go. But from take the Nicholas Sandmann case, for instance, he was not a household name when the media basically lied about him. He clearly is. I still don't know if he's nearly as popular as Kyle Rittenhouse is. But after that happened, he became more of a household name. He was still able to sue, and although he didn't win, like they didn't actually go to a civil trial, I think that the minute that they got into discovery, all these media companies were just like, ooh, yeah, we don't want people seeing what's going on in our organization. Let's see what we can pay him to make this go away. So I think if Kyle can at least go ahead.
It's really odd, though, that the media made them into celebrities by lying about them, and then are claiming, well, not celebrities, public figures, sorry. Mm-hmm. They made them into public figures because of the lies they made about them, and then they're going to now claim, well, he's a public figure. It's like,
yeah, and that may be something where because he wasn't at the time, he has a way to get restitution. But again, if he can get them into a point where they need to go into Discovery, I think he can settle. And in a just world, he'd make more than Nicholas Sandman and Richard Jewell combined.
Well, yeah, I mean, they just openly went around calling him a white supremacist, racist,
Mhm.
like with all this crap with zero evidence, and then they're just total malfeasance. So, I wanted to take this other, or point out this other thing. PSA Sitch tweeted this out, and this has to do with the cross-examination, and I felt it was brilliant. In his case today was, 1, Kyle, why did you shoot someone trying to take your gun from you after threatening to kill you? 2, why did you shoot someone hitting you with a blunt object? 3, why did you shoot someone who only pointed a pistol at your head? 4, why didn't you render medical aid to anyone while a mob was attempting to kill you? Oh my God, that was hysterical. Why didn't you turn around and give first aid to the guy who just tried to shoot you? Oh my God.
That's the funny thing
Yeah, I
too
know.
is they spend so much time trying to say, oh, you lied about being a medic. Oh, you're not a medic. You're not a medic. Oh, but by the way, why didn't you offer these guys medical help? It's so
and then
comical.
5 was, why did you value your own life over those individuals who were attacking you? And that was the thing that he kept saying over and over again was like, you realize that guns can kill people, right? Why did you, I was like, what the hell?
Well, yeah, his phrasing was, and you just didn't care what would happen to them when you fired. And it's like, well, no, I cared what would happen to me more than what would happen to them. That's the thing.
See, that's where I would have
the meaning of self-defense.
I would have made a bad witness. I would have said, did you care what happened to them when you shoot them? No, I really didn't give a shit. They were trying to kill me. If they died, cool. If not, cool too.
I mean, an honest answer that he could have given was just, it all happened so fast. They were attacking me. I didn't have time to think about what would happen to them if I stopped them from attacking me. That's an honest response.
Yeah.
Do you have more on that, Johnny? You haven't spoken as much.
No, I don't. I don't really have anything to add to that.
Okay. This is
No,
Gage.
this is in case somebody breaks into my house in the future. You guys can't use anything I said here against me.
I also want to know which weasel of a friend gave that footage to Binger.
I think that was Dominic Black, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's got to be Dominic Black. Got to be.
Let me stand up for Dominic here. He's 19. He's facing long prison time. And this whole thing of loyalty to your friend, when you're facing federal prison charges and state prison charges, I think it would be really hard for a kid to not step in and say, okay, look, you got me. Here's what I've got. He doesn't want to go to jail, and I can't blame him. I mean, keep in mind, it's not like it's his brother. I'm not going to blame Dominic Black for what he did. I really am not.
Well, he has a good reason to be concerned, and that's something I kept telling people during the course of my streams was like, you got to remember that almost every witness here has an ongoing litigation. They all have their own legal angles to what's going on. Like they're all involved in lawsuits or their own charges. And as a consequence, they're not actually incentivized necessarily to give the whole truth.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to just mention briefly, because you're bringing up the Richie McGinnis testimony. I've noticed, because again, we talked about how the media has lied by omission. When they brought up Gage Grosskreuz's testimony, they said, the only thing they highlighted was he feared for his life, and he says Kyle shot him while his hands were in the air. They bring up, other people's testimonies, and they omit all the important parts. They didn't really bring up, Richie McGinnis's testimony was almost non-existent in media coverage. They really didn't talk about his testimony at all, just because there was nothing that he said that was beneficial to the prosecution that they could, omit everything else. I feel like they didn't mention his testimony, especially the most damning part at all.
You know what wasn't brought up enough is that cop.
Which one?
Babe cop, they call her on Twitter.
Oh, her?
Blonde girl.
Yeah.
She looked really irritated. It was very clear she didn't want to be there.
Well, how about she said, they said, well, what happens if you fire a casing that's already been fired? She says it goes click, not boom. Do you guys remember that?
Well, it just felt like she was like, why am I here? And I kind of get it. It was another example of the prosecution calling somebody, and I'm like, why are we talking to this person? Or and then the box with the stuff in it, I was like, is this a pepperoni pizza?
Well,
Yes, it is.
Well, what's interesting though is this is the thing, right? I mean, I guess it's not a smoking gun, but if Gage kept saying he re-racked, he pulled the charging handle back. And
Yeah, that's such a
re-racked,
joke.
right? If he did that, there'd be a live round on the ground, and she didn't pick up so all he had to do was get that in the evidence. Now during closing, he can say, look, when he's tearing apart Gage's story, because in 2.5 hours, he's going to tear apart all those stories. He's going to say, Gage says he re-racked his rifle. You heard from Babe Cop that she did not pick up an unspent round. Boom. He lied or he was mistaken at best, right?
I remember somebody live streaming finding more bullets on the ground that had not, or bullet casings, I'm assuming from Kyle's rifle, that for some reason had not been picked up. And they apparently had been there for like 2 days. They had just rolled under one of the cars at Car Source. So it's not like they had to dig or anything.
Right.
Johnny, did you have anything more before I play this clip?
No, go ahead.
So this is the thug life moment of Richie McGinnis in the trial. Make sure I got the volume.
I'll be right back, guys.
Go ahead.
So your interpretation of what he was trying to do or what he was intending to do or anything along those lines is complete guesswork, isn't it?
Well, he said, fuck you, and then he reached for the weapon.
Give me my money and stacks and lace my bitches.
It really is just such a joke. Like, what does what witness has the prosecution brought forward that has helped them in any way in this trial? Like, I really can't think of one.
No witnesses. No.
Just
a drone.
Yeah, a blurry Bigfoot video.
A drone that is entirely too far away. That's the only witness that I've seen for the prosecution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, it's amazing. Like, there's been all these moments like that are like thug life moments for Kyle, and the media, for the most part, has not shown any of them, with the exception of Gage's testimony, the questioning by Shira Fisi for the big reveal, like about him pointing the gun at him. So that's been amazing to me that they could be that blatant about their bias in this thing. But I suppose that stuff shouldn't amaze me anymore. I mean, we've been seeing it for so long now; it's gotten ridiculous.
It's honestly just been a train wreck, and it's been so mind numbing. It almost feels like he's just filling up the clock, like running up the clock. Mm-hmm. That's the term I would use. Like if I was watching football or stalling, if it was wrestling, it's just like, what are you doing? And it made me wonder what it is he was stalling for, or if he's just filling air, for some reason. Go ahead.
Interestingly, I actually think when the defense called Kyle to the stand, I think that stunned the prosecution. I don't think they had any idea that was coming, and so when they went,
he needed to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
It's like, shit, I need to check my underwear.
Yes, when they called Kyle to the stand, the defense did. That stunned the prosecution. I think by the time the cross-examination came, they didn't have a prepared set of questions. They had no idea where to go with it, and I think at that point they really were stalling for time in order to get to the lunch break so they could try and figure out a line of questioning to go to, because their first half of those questions were just nothing. They were nonsense.
Nothing.
Kevin, what do you think of the decision to put Kyle on the stand? I think you may have mentioned it earlier, but
honestly, it's one of those decisions that defense attorneys have to make, that if they put him on the stand, they're going to take all kinds of praise and
Right, man. What do we do?
Oops, sorry about that.
Condemnation. If they don't, they'll take. There's no right or wrong answer. I think in this case, it helps because it shows that he's a human. It shows that he was upset about everything. But Trey Gowdy, you guys know who he is. He's one of my favorite, former congressmen. He was on an episode of Forensic Files, and he says, in his twangy Southern voice, he says, what we prosecutors always say is, what do you call a defendant that does not testify at his own trial? An inmate. So that's kind of the old rule, is you look guilty. I don't care what the judge tells the jury. The judges, if Kyle would not have taken the stand, the Wisconsin jury instructions, the judge would have said to the jury, in this case, the defendant did not take the stand. That is his constitutional right. You are not to use that as a sign of guilt. Bullshit. the jury does not listen to jury instructions, right? When you
Well,
look
yeah,
at
they're
it,
just going to go do whatever they want. basically.
exactly. That's what I would do, and I'm honest. If a judge, if a defendant screamed out, "Yeah, I killed that bitch," and then the judge says, "You are to disregard what you just heard him say." Come on, I'm going to go in the jury room and I'm going to say, "Let's get this done quick so we can go have pizza," right? So, I think that he had to take the stand because you're going to have the jury wondering why he didn't. And that's going to be a topic that they're going to talk about is, if he did something, if he did nothing wrong, why wouldn't he go up there and tell us? And so I think they did the right thing. Dershowitz agreed to.
Do you think the jury responded well to it? I think you mentioned your answer before.
Yeah,
but
they seemed sympathetic to him. They seemed sympathetic to his mother, who, I'm like awkward because I'm like sitting right next to her and, the jury's looking at her and they can hear her crying. I think it was effective to put him on the stand. And if you guys noticed, there was no redirect. Right when T. Claire was done, boom. He and they did it first too. Usually you see the defendant testifying last. In this case, they got it out of the way because they felt they had to, and then boom, then they had other testimony following that. So, the testimony they hear, closer to the deliberation is usually what sticks in their mind the most. But I think we're going to see some very, very sharp closing arguments from the defense. I'm not sure who's going to do them. I think it'll probably be Sharafi.
I like him better. I hope he does.
Yeah, I mean, they're both really sharp attorneys. And it goes to what you were saying, Johnny, is you hated seeing the defense attorneys going on TV saying, "Oh, blah blah blah, he should be guilty." Mark Richards is a Democrat. You guys probably wouldn't have thought that, but he's a Democrat, which I won't hold that against him too much.
He's the guy who defended Zimmerman, right?
Zimmerman.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was thinking of Mark O'Mara. My apologies.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Mark Richards is a Racine attorney. That's the city just to the north of us. But yeah, he's a Democrat, but he's still vigorously fighting for his client. He might, I don't know. I don't pretend to know, but he might be one of those who he doesn't believe that people should be able to carry around AR-15s. But that's not on his mind. He doesn't care. He puts that aside, and he's vigorously defending his client. But yeah, they're both sharp. They're both, they kind of have the different, Sharafi, he uses these hand motions and these, he hypnotizes you. He's just so sharp. And, and Richards is the type of guy, this is ridiculous. And he's been a practicing attorney for 20 years. He knows, it's kind of like good cop, bad cop almost. I think you're going to see Sharafi give the closing arguments, and they're going to be powerful because the evidence has all been on the side of the defense. Then you have the rebuttal, which I don't understand for the life of me. That's one thing I think the founders got wrong. Why would you let the state get to be the last one to talk before the jury goes to deliberate? I'll never understand that. I think it should be the prosecution, then the defense, and that should be it. Or then you should have the defense, then the prosecution, then the defense. The defendant's lawyer should be the last one to talk to the jury before they go, but that's a long-standing thing that's happened. But either way, they each get 2.5 hours. I think you're going to see powerful closing arguments tomorrow from the defense that are all corroborated by evidence, and you're going to see strong closing arguments by the prosecution that is not corroborated by evidence, but it's corroborated by emotion and not sound logic.
What do you think that they're going to say, the prosecution?
The prosecution is going to say, what do they say in the legal thing? Had it not been for, they're going to say, look, Kyle did not belong there that night. It was a dangerous situation. He introduced more danger by bringing a weapon that, the drinking game is 30 rounds, right? Every time that banger said 30 rounds, AR-15. And it, by the way, it's not an AR-15 style rifle. It is an AR-15. If I hear one more person say AR-15 style weapon.
Yeah, it's a trademark issue.
Yeah, I guess. So anyways, they're going to say, he's a 17-year-old kid who interjected himself into a situation in which he was not welcome nor invited. We heard from the brothers. They did not ask him to be there. That's what you're going to hear. You're going to hear the stuff because he can say that in his closing because the brothers did deny asking him. But the prosecution is going to say to the jury, listen to what common sense tells you. Common sense tells you Kyle and his group were asked to be there. You are the judges of credibility. Do you think the two brothers were credible?
No,
they weren't.
No, I don't think anybody did.
The jury is responsible for determining credibility. I think Gage, with his long hair and gauged out ears, he wasn't credible. He's suing the city. Remember, Gage, the only thing on Gage's mind right now is that 10 million. And the only thing on his attorney's mind right now is 30% of that 10 million, which is about 3 million. So he's got a lot to win here. Kyle's got a lot to lose. So the jury looks at these things. The car source owners have a lot to lose as well. That's why they lied. So it's hard to hold them. It's hard to get really mad at them because they're sticking up for their livelihood. But at the end of the day, technically, their false testimony could help the jury convict. Because remember, that's part of this media misinformation is he came from out of state to defend a business that didn't want him there. So they play into that with their false testimony, with their perjury.
Are you saying he crossed state lines?
I'm saying that's what a lot of dumb people are saying.
Yeah, wow.
And to be honest, I think that part of the strategy in having Kyle testify was so that he could really put that narrative to bed. Because I think that is something that you hear a lot out there in the ether, and they will try and argue the whole he shouldn't have been there thing. But when he testified that his father lives there, his aunt lives there, his grandmother lives there, he works there, his friend is there, he was staying at his friend's house. I think that when you hear that he is that big of a part of the community, that kind of takes the sting out of that critique. So I think that's the one reason I think it was a good idea for him to testify so that he could get that out there. But I think that kind of defanged the whole he shouldn't have been there argument, which I really think is their best and only argument at this point.
So I want to take a moment now again from something from Twitter, but this was a while ago. But this kind of, to me, personifies the issue of this being turned into a racial case, because, and this is an example of the kind of media you're going to get. Kyle Rittenhouse trial opens with his lawyer saying the N-word twice in court. So he's quoting Joseph Rosenbaum, the person that they're canonizing as a saint. But the media needs to report this because, of course, his lawyers need to be racist. The judge needs to be racist. Everything associated with this needs to be racist so that the race grifters like Black Lives Matter, all their founders are millionaires now. Ibram X. Kendi,
Marxist millionaires.
Right, who gets paid. Ibram X. Kendi gets $25,000 to do a Zoom call to a school. He doesn't even have to go. There's so much money being made on this racial grift because it's another thing that the hot button issue, like I said earlier, that the news media plugs into the same things that our social media algorithms do, which is that whatever will make somebody upset or reinforce their worldview is what is more likely to keep them on their phone or on their TV, which is why I go out of my way to try to find streams that I don't completely agree with. Like I go listen to Liberal Dan, even though I don't agree with probably 70% of what he says on his show. And I go listen to Glowicki just because it allows me to be also exposed to what's going on in the other room while all this is going on. What is the heartbeat on that side? Because we don't get exposed in any way to what the other side thinks about things, and as a consequence, we all get echo chambered, which just leads to radicalization. But this is an example of completely, utterly like clickbait, irresponsible journalism to imply like he said it as if he's like they're characterizing this as if Richards got up in his opening statement and said, and then there were these N-words out there in the streets burning stuff down, so we had to go out there with our guns. And that's what this comes like. This is the image that they're thinking they're putting in the minds of the people reading this.
Yes, and it's not accidental.
Nope, not at all.
No, this is all crafted.
But fortunately, I think the race angle of this case has kind of collapsed, just because people have found out that it was a white person accused of killing two white people with a white judge and white like it. The idea that there's a racial angle behind this case, it just seems like such a joke at this point. I think the media has kind of backed up off of that angle for that reason. I know they tried to. I mean, obviously they're trying to smear the judge with whatever they can, like with the whole Asian food joke. But that there really isn't a racial angle to this case, and it seems like the media recognizes that at this point.
Absolutely. So we've been at this a while, gentlemen. If any of you are feeling tired, we can start talking about wrapping it up. Otherwise, I'm free to continue. Up to you guys.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably have to dip out in a couple minutes here too myself.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I'm probably going to call it a day as well. We have been at it for quite a while.
Yeah,
I
that's
want to
fine.
thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much for showing up. You've really helped us understand a lot more about what's going on in Kenosha. A lot of useful information.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me. Nice to finally meet you guys virtually. I know we've talked before, but yeah, let's try to do this again post verdict. I think
Absolutely.
that'd be a fun discussion to have.
And I hope
Yeah.
that this isn't the last time we get together, for sure.
Yeah, in fact, I think that was it Paul that was going to form some sort of like post verdict kind of get together.
Yeah, he talked about that for sure. It's a question of what the mood
What
of
the
the
mood will
moment
be.
Yes.
I wanted to take a quick second to bring this up because nobody talks about it anymore. But after they found out this was a hoax, then all of a sudden this story went away. But apparently a black woman was putting racist letters in a whole bunch of mailboxes in a neighborhood, like trying to create a hoax. Like they're trying to create a mass hysteria. And I'm curious, it comes back to what I said earlier, like what is the motive to make everything so racial? And it can't just be the grift. There has to be more to it than that. There has to be another motive to it. So, but in any case, it's been great talking to you guys. And for those of you who are tuning in from my channel, I uploaded a couple of videos. One of them, for some reason, is not getting too much play on the algorithm, and I think it probably has something to do with the subject matter. But I openly expose the truth about whether or not riots are even effective as a means of activism. And the truth is, scientifically, they empirically are not effective. And I go over all of it, and in typical V Radio fashion, all the receipts are in the description. So that's the video that for some reason has like 200 views, and all of my other ones have like 1,000, which makes me wonder who is it that has a vested interest in this information not seeing the light of day. So what have you guys, so you take a moment and also talk about the things you're doing, just so people know what to look at on your channels.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start us off here. Again, I'm Johnny Walker Dread. I have numerous videos on Kyle Rittenhouse, and I'm going to be punching out a lot more in my Binger Boneheaded Moments. I'm going to be putting out a lot more in that series because he's given me a ton of ammo for that. So if you're interested in Kyle Rittenhouse, and I do some other stuff besides that, but if you're interested, by all means, go to my channel, and thank you so much again for joining in.
Right. I want to thank you guys for having me on. Johnny Walker Dread V Radio. It's been great talking to you guys. Kevin, you as well. It was nice to meet you. Name's Bernewski. I literally just started doing YouTube stuff like a month and a half, 2 months ago. Still very new at it, but I feel like each video I'm making is getting better. Basically just talking about like cultural, political stuff. If any of you guys want to see what I have to say about like, the impact of LeBron James or the Julius Jones case or any sort of thing like that. Obviously, Kyle Rittenhouse I've talked about a few times. Feel free to check out my channel. Don't put out content a lot because I work a lot now. I'm in the restaurant business. But I'll try to put out as much stuff to keep you guys interested as possible.
People are asking where they can donate to our streams. You guys can check out v-radio.us, which you can see at the top of my thing there. It's just a link tree that'll take you to Patreon, Subscribestar, or PayPal. And you can also join my social media, like again, and I keep emphasizing this because like for the last video that I just did that had an even better in-depth analysis, he was commenting like a dozen times trying to get my attention to say, hey, I have this information. And the only way he felt he could contact me was via YouTube comments. And I am very engaged on YouTube, but YouTube will just eat stuff and you don't even know why. Like, you don't even know why they deleted it. I don't know if it's the algorithm going crazy or what, but he was literally trying to tell me, hey, I have this footage. And that's why I didn't get it until like 4 a.m. and put it together and made a video out of it. So even if you don't plan to chat with me on there, my Discord is not noisy. It's mostly just people occasionally posting links, and so so as a consequence, you could join my Discord, join my Telegram, join my Facebook, because I want you guys to be able to reach me if you get any kind of scoop, if you get something that you want me to report on. I'm very big on interacting with my audience. Even if I got 100,000 subscribers, it is my plan to try to be the guy that actually bothers to listen to his audience. Because, like, for example, as much as I like Destiny, I've literally seen him go on streams and just sit there and play video games. It's like he's barely paying attention. That sort of thing is never going to be me. So in any case, and obviously, Kevin, tell them about the Milwaukee Sentinel, or not Milwaukee Sentinel, Kenosha County Eye. Kenosha County Eye.
Sure. So the Kenosha County Eye is KenoshaCountyEye.com. I do not have a Facebook account. I'm banned for life. It's a badge of honor that I hold near and dear to my heart. But I am recently new to Twitter. So if you go to Twitter and type in Kevin Matthewson, 1T, Kenosha County I, or at Kenosha CTYI, and I will be tweeting live from the courtroom for the remainder of the trial. And you're not going to see me posting what happens in court because everybody knows what's going on in court. I'm looking towards the, non-public things like, the lead detective is the mayor's nephew, stuff like that is not being reported. That's what I do. So the Kenosha News is biased. They report things that are politically okay to report. I report everything.
So in my final poll, guys, I'm asking the audience, do you feel that and this isn't about your personal opinion. This is about what your gut instinct is. The poll is, do you feel that the jury will say guilty, not guilty? Or is the issue too close to call? Therefore, you don't have an opinion because you're not sure. Feel free to answer that on our way out the door. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Check out my website. I think, honestly, you guys should be subscribed to every channel that is on this stream. And if you're not already, ring the bell. Find other ways, again, to spread the signal, guys, because the algorithm is not kind to stuff like this. The algorithm is kind to people feeding narratives. So, take responsibility for that, because in many cases, Tim Pool brings this up all the time, and he's actually got a lot of subscribers. In many cases, people are never going to learn about any of the stuff that we're doing if it doesn't get shared, and again, thanks everybody for coming on. It was great talking to you guys. It was a good conversation. And I look forward to seeing what's up, and I guess, I'll ask the panelists your answers since you can't participate in the poll. Do you feel the jury's going to say guilty, not guilty, or man, is it too close to call? I'll start with Johnny.
I think, can we just choose hung jury instead of too close to call?
Can somebody define hung jury for me? I feel stupid, but I don't know what that means.
The jury simply refuses to come to a guilty or not guilty verdict.
Jury decision has to be unanimous. So if there's like a holdout or something like that who just won't change their mind, that would be a hung jury.
Well, okay, so that's your option. I'm leaning towards not guilty, especially now that we can defeat that picture. And I did talk to Shafirasi briefly on the phone and told him to be looking in his email box for my stuff and for other stuff that was sent. I did have some rude commenters say things to me like, did you record the conversation with the lawyer? Like, I need to prove to them. And I'm like,
you're not on the stand.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do, guys. I'm going to record Shafirasi, who I'm trying to establish, hey, would you please listen to me? Because I'm trying to help this kid, and because I didn't record him, I made it up or something. And they also acted like, how did you get in touch with him? Like I was calling the president of the United States. I went to his website and got his damn phone number. And now, mind you, the fact that I got him directly, I think, was because I called him probably after they were closed, because he picked up the phone himself, and I didn't go to a secretary. But these people are public figures that you can call because clients have to be able to contact them. So it's not like I casted voodoo or something to be able to talk to this guy.
And these guys, believe it or not, have clients other than Kyle.
Right, exactly. I mean, I'd never heard of the guy before Kyle. So Bernewski, what's your take on the poll?
Personally, I think he'll be found not guilty. The only thing, you never know with the jury, there could be some plant on the jury who's just going to be a holdout who might swing it to a hung jury. But in that instance, I think there's a possibility that the judge might direct a verdict or something like that. So I think Kyle's going to get off, and then after that, it's just what does he do to go after the media? And I can't wait to find out.
God, I hope he owns the media. What are you thinking, Kevin?
So juries are unpredictable, but what I can tell you that I would bet my life savings is one outcome that will not happen is Kyle will not be convicted. To convince 12 people that kid who was scared for his life committed murder, I believe is impossible. And I believe they knew it, but they charged him anyways. So if I had to guess, I would say there will be 2 or 3 people that just will not go along with the rest, and they'll argue. The judge will give what's called the dynamite instruction, which means you guys got to come up with a verdict, period. It's kind of like a bluff type of thing. But I am hoping and praying for a not guilty verdict, but I think it's more likely that it will be a hung jury, and then we'll see just how arrogant Mike Gravely is, if he's going to recharge it or admit that he was wrong and say, no, I'm not going to. And by the way, what you will see is you will not see him saying, look, we can't prove it. What you'll say is, I'm sorry, you will not see him say, we made a mistake. What you'll say is, look, I think that Kyle is guilty of these crimes, but we just can't prove it. So he won't concede that what they did was wrong, but he will say something like, we can't prove it, and that'll be it. And that's just as good as a not guilty, because Kyle will be free and he will have no convictions on his record.
All right. Well, the outcome of the poll, with 39 votes out of 112 viewers, because everybody else did not seek to use their democratic right. Well, hey, it's a common election, right? Most people don't vote. So far, it's 67% not guilty, 23% too close to call, and 10% of guilty. So I just wanted to conclude with that and to say I will be streaming tomorrow. Usually as soon as it becomes available. I think that's usually 10 p.m. my time. As far as what time, I'm assuming it's going to be the same time that it's been every day, which is like 9 a.m. their time, 10 a.m. my time. And I will be streaming the whole thing. I take during the breaks. I usually, I go on and I either bring on like Checkmate or anybody that's available, or I play videos and entertain you guys. So, it's a marathon, that's for sure. I basically have been doing 8 or 9 hour streams a day for the last 2 weeks, which is rough because you get out of it and it's like you have a freaking hangover because they're so long. It doesn't help that enduring Binger is like, and it wouldn't be so bad if he was actually making some moves in the case. It's just most of the time you spend your mental energy going, why is he doing this? Why is he talking to this person? Why are we watching 20 minutes of this video? Like, he opened up with that. I'm like, you just played a video of somebody walking around the protest, said nothing. I'm just, so you just waste so much time. It's like,
Or when you let the video play for like 10 minutes of these looters pushing around a barrel saying, let's burn down the police department. Let's burn down the police department over and over. And he just let it play. I'm thinking, this is a prosecution witness. Are you kidding me?
Right, for sure, guys. So that's it for me. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, ring the bell, do the same on the other streams that you are listening to this on. And I hope that you guys will join us for the stream. And I leave them available. I'm not taking them down, so they're always there. If you miss and you come in late, I promise it'll be worth your time. Thanks again for tuning in. Oh, one more thing, Johnny.
One more thing. Phil Smith talked about Legal Bites having a really good take on that blurry video thing. The one on your channel is the best I've seen. And also go to Logical Checkmate. He has a great video on that thing as well. So I go ahead and watch Legal Bites, but you got to get those two in there as well. Okay, I'm done.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks
All right,
again,
take
guys.
care. Thanks
All right,
again,
bye.
Kevin.
Sure.